Good evening. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Board of Directors agenda meeting for the November 29th, 2022. This is our opportunity to review the agenda for our formal board meeting that will be held on December 6, 2022. Today, we have our Hope Council presentation that we'll have before us. I believe if the members of the Hope Council subcommittee chairs, are they here with us today? Well, as you all are coming, I believe Mr. Michael Sanders is going to kick us off. Is that correct? And as he's coming, I just want to take this time just to share a few words, just kind of level set on the Hope Council, which stands for Holistic Prevention in each neighborhood. And so as we're talking through this, if you guys will remember, in the wake of violent crime increasing here in the city of Little Rock, as we know, we started to really see at the beginning and the middle of the pandemic, violent crime to increase in the city of Little Rock alongside each city across this nation. One of the things that we put into place were a number of different protocols. First, if you all recall, the members of the city board, I believe in February of 21, approved an ordinance that identified the community violence that we were seeing as a public health emergency, where we were able to do many different things as it relates to fighting and combating violent crime in our community. One of those things that came out of it was naming a director of neighborhood safety within the community programs department, which is Mr. Michael Sanders, who's before you. We also leveraged close to $1.5 million of the American Rescue Plan Act dollars to focus on community violence reduction, where we invested into prevention, intervention, treatment programs in addition to the 5.5 that historically that the city board has invested into prevention, intervention, treatment. But the nuance with the community violence funds, which still went through the process with community within prevention, intervention, treatment, and community programs. But we had a new set of players who had some new ideas to move forward on how we address violent crime. Everything from hospital-based prevention efforts after a shooting with UAMS to additional work with Boys and Girls Clubs of Central Arkansas, and whether it's other conflict resolutions from a number of different organizations that we're able to solicit these proposals, but also do this new work. And so I wanted to make sure that members of the board kind of had that, kind of take you back in time, back to February 21, when we initiated a series of different things that were part of our community violence reduction plan. And from that, what we've seen, while homicides have hit a historic number, I believe around 75, we've seen overall violent crime decrease now to date is a negative 8%, and also to date, we see that overall crime is somewhere around 0%, 0.2 in comparisons to last year. And of course, last year, being 2021, was higher than 2020, as we've seen this uptick as it relates to many different things as it relates to the pandemic. So what we want to do is continue to make sure that we're doing things with the community and not to the community, as I know City Director Richardson often says. And so as we were providing these new dollars through the Community Violence Reduction Plan, through the American Rescue Plan Act, we solicited help from a myriad of community leaders, and Director Sanders will share all of those community leaders' names. But there were several different subcommittees, and I believe on those subcommittees was Miss Lita Anthony, whom we all know Mark Demise and Michael Sanders. And Michael will share what those subcommittees were, and he will also list all the members of the Hope Council Committee that are here and those who may not be here, which was a good depiction, culmination of the community that's really working in the trenches on a lot of these issues. And so we wanted to get their feedback on how we could get better, how we can increase some innovation and ingenuity as it relates to community violence reduction. And so they've been working on this for the past few months, and today we'll have this recommendation. So again, I want to credit the city board. This doesn't happen without the city board. Clearly, we made the proposal, but it does not happen without the city board because you all funded community violence reduction through the American Rescue Plan Act of close to $1.5 million. And I might add, as we, the city of Little Rock, received national attention on how we have leveraged our American Rescue Plan Act dollars for community violence reduction and being very innovative. So I want to credit the city board for really doing something new and different and accepting this proposal as we move forward from that standpoint. And again, I probably talked too much, Director Sanders. If you'll reel me back in and kind of share what you all have been doing these past several months and these recommendations.
I was trying to do that, Mayor, before he spoke. I had my.
And I'm sorry, before you get there, I also, before City Director Richardson, I acknowledge him if he gives me this personal privilege to interrupt him. City Director Richardson was a co-chair of the Hope Council, and we're very grateful for his leadership. And we all know his historic leadership in dealing with crisis management, street teams, prevention, intervention, and treatment. He had a storied history with New Futures for Youth, and he was able to bring that expertise, that knowledge base, and that real world experiences to the Hope Council as well. And so before Director Sanders of the Office of Neighborhood Safety gives us this Hope Council presentation, I also want to give to Director Richardson.
Thank you, Mayor. Real quickly, I want to thank you for personally for coming up with this conceptual framework. I certainly want to thank all of our members who gave us their time and their expertise and their work to try to help us find a way to combat this recent uptick in violence that we've seen. You mentioned new a couple of times, and sometimes new means going back to old and looking at what you guys developed during the Future Little Rock campaign back in 1993 that gave us our PIT funding. So kind of making sure we don't divorce ourselves from stuff that has worked in the past, revisiting some of that stuff and looking at that from a conceptual framework standpoint. I want to just thank everybody for giving us their time, their attention, their expertise, and their hard work. And I think we're blessed to have the group that we have as members, and they're excited and they're really, really, really interested in helping us improve our community from a public safety standpoint beyond more policing and more jailing of young people. So I want to thank them, Mayor, and thank you too for bringing this to our attention.
Thank you so much, Director Richardson. Again, to the members of the Hope Council, Director Sanders will identify everyone who's here with us today and those who weren't able to attend. Just on behalf of the City of Little Rock, I want you all to know how much we appreciate you giving your time and your talent in these many weeks to the city. It doesn't go unnoticed. I want to make sure you know how much we each appreciate you. Director Sanders.
Thank you, Mayor. To the board, to City Manager Bruce Moore.
Director Sanders, if you'll speak into the mic a little closer.
Thank you, Mayor. Can you hear me now? Test.
That's better.
Good. Thank you, Mayor. To the board, City Manager. It was a pleasure to serve on the Hope Council Advisory Committee. As the Mayor stated, thank you to the board for allocating funds and giving us those dollars to explore. Adding on to what the Mayor said, the Hope Council was made up of community leaders who were eager to come in and lend their support and their expertise. Community leaders who serve in a number of different capacities, Their recommendations represent their collective expertise and intelligence in the field, but most importantly, they represent their dedication and commitment to a better and safer Little Rock. The Hope Council was divided into 3 subcommittees, all of which researched and evaluated our current efforts. These recommendations represent positive, tangible ways to reduce crime and invest in our youth and community. Director Ken Richardson, who served as our council chair, Ms. Lita Anthony was the chair of our legislative policy subcommittee. Myself, Michael Sanders, I served as the community safety programming subcommittee chair. And then Pastor Mark Demaz served as the chair of the built environment subcommittee. Also, members of the council was Judge Melanie Martin, Judge Leon Johnson, Mr. Cambry Charles, Ms. Yolanda Harrison, Ms. Dana Dossett, Mr. Tim Campbell, Ms. Mallory Visser, Pastor Billy Burris, Mr. Reggie Swinton, and Ms. Chanel Smith. At this time, do we have the presentation pulled up? At this time, I'll yield the floor to our first presenter, Ms. Lita Anthony. She'll present the findings and the recommendations of the legislative policy or the policy subcommittee.
Good evening, Mayor Scott, members of the board, City Manager Bruce Moore. Just a little bit about this commission and the work that we have been allowed to do on behalf of the City of Little Rock. I want to single out just for a moment the other members of this subcommittee that brought their experience, their concerns, and the voices of other neighbors in the community to the table. They were the Honorable Judge Melanie Morton, the Honorable Judge Leon Johnson, Mr. Cambry Charles, and my inspiration throughout this process, Ms. Yolanda Harrison. Ms. Harrison is extremely special to this work because she brought her life experience to this discussion. She is the mother of a son that was violently killed in this city. She is an individual that reaches out to other mothers throughout this city to make sure that they are informed, that they know of resources, and that they are encouraged. And during this entire process, our short and brief exchanges inspired me as a mother of 3 sons who are now adults to want to do more in this city to stop the violence. In looking at the recommendations that we made, it was not pointing fingers, it was not laying blame. We are grateful for the men and women of the Little Rock Police Force. We are grateful for the different commissions and committees, children, youth, and families, street teams, victim services, and all those things that work together right now to make a difference in our city. But as the numbers show, it's not enough. We need more in so many different categories, and in categories we hadn't even discussed before. And that's what these recommendations are about. So we started with the whole issue of law enforcement. And in our first meeting of the safety committee reporting out at Philander Smith, there was a woman in the crowd that had experienced a death of a child just a few days before we made our presentation. And her concern was about the level of communication that she was receiving in the process. How do I know where my status or my situation is? And with all the things that are now presently working in our community, that is a major complaint from a lot of members of our community. I'm left out of the loop of what's taking place when it comes to what has happened in my child's case. Was anybody arrested? What's happening in the court system? How do I limit my frustrations of what has already happened to me that I've had no control over, get the information that I need to be able to survive this tragedy that has taken place in my life? So one of the first things that we talked about is how do we strengthen that component? And we feel that one of the measures is to create or make more visible, since we know that we've got several victim services group that is part of the 21st Century Division of the city of Little Rock, which we're very grateful that has been created and added to our arsenal of ways to deal with this issue. But we need more. We need more support for those family members who go through these situations of losing a loved one and being left out of the loop. We need more support for those individuals who have mental or behavioral health issues. We need more. We need professionals who have skills in the subject matter. And it's one thing we've learned throughout this process in this recommendation is that there are many people in our community who have the expertise, who want to be a part of the solution, not bringing excuses to our table, but rather bringing solutions. So we feel that the creation or the increase of visibility and adding more staff to be that conduit between our victim's family and what's happening in the system is a necessary part of helping our folk heal in our community. And the healing process also is one of those things that will also reduce crime, because what we do find out with what we are finding out in our community is that a lot of crime is retaliation because that healing process never gets started. So we feel that that's a major piece to this recommendation, and there's a lot of resources out there, including nonprofits, faith-based organizations that are willing to come to our rescue in being able to be a part of that conduit that will bring a lot of relief and support to families. The second one is the role of the parents. Our parents are getting younger and younger and younger. And one of the things that we feel that, we have a lot of programs out there, and for the most part, they're targeting toward our kids. Well, our kids, once they go through these programs, they still go back to the same household. And without that family having some training or having some support, that issue never resolves itself. So we feel that there should be more responsibility and benefits to the parents in this community that gives them the tools to work with their children through these processes. There are problems that are within our custodial process with who gets the child and who gets the benefit of having the child and what needs to happen in balancing that act between the father and the mother and the custodial parent. So we hope that through some type of program, we will be able to add support to the family in balancing the rights of both parents. There is a recommendation for a permanent commission to work. One of the things that we'd like to see in this recommendation is Public Safety Commission. And again, it does not minimize any commission's work. We see this as an additive, a support, a binder to the whole thing that's taking place in our community that has to do with crime. One of the things that we've seen throughout our history, and some of us have been here longer than the youth that are now being born in our community. And we know what it is to come together and resolve these issues, whether we're talking about what happened with banging in Little Rock, or whether we're talking about what was happening on the streets of Little Rock in the 90s. One of the things we do know is when we come together, when we leave, drop our rocks, whatever they may be labeled, that we resolve the issues of our community. And that too is what these resolutions, these recommendations are all about, is new ways for us to find to work together. But in the commission's work, it's something that's more permanent place. One of the things that we've done in the past, that once the storm was over, then those programs went by the wayside. Safety is always going to be an issue in our community, and it should be treated as such. There should be a commission that is always on the job of identifying changes in our community that might bring crime back to us. Violent crime is not the only crime that's taking place in our community. There are a lot of underlying crimes that we feel that escalates the whole issue of violent crimes. There are a lot of crimes against individuals and our seniors. This safety commission would have the responsibility, we would hope, of keeping a finger on the pulse of the community in knowing where those rises, those ebbs are within our community, and being able to make recommendations to be more of an intervention and a prevention rather than a reaction to what's taking place in our community. And again, one of the things that we found out throughout this process is that there are so many people in our community who are willing to go to work on the issue of crime. The next recommendation has to do with you, the city board, the governing body. Regardless to where crime is happening in this city, whether it's in 1, 2, 4, 6 ward, it is happening in the city of Little Rock. These wards are contiguous because they all make up the total city of Little Rock. And if it's happening in any ward, it is something that you as a board are accountable to address. We're hopeful that you will formulate plans within your own wards that brings the best of what we have in our community together to take ownership and also responsibility of solving the crime in our city. Crime is something that just doesn't fall out at the chief of police's office or at the mayor's office. It falls in all of our hands. And by you as a city board, you also hold the purse strings. You decide what is funded and what's not. And hearing from your community by those group meetings and formulating those plans makes you experts in knowing what you need to do in your respective areas. So we, again, ask that you begin to have more input, more formulating of local plans. Even though it's the whole city of Little Rock, each ward is different in its needs, in its composition, and how to resolve their issues. So we would hope that you as a leadership would take a stronger role in making sure that the voices of your community is heard as we try to resolve these issues. The next recommendation has to do with the warranty of habitability. And of course, you've all heard this one before. The warranty of habitability has to do with our housing. A lot of our crime happens in old homes and in old areas and in poor living conditions. And it also brings about a health factor. Health and safety kind of goes hand in hand. So we would hope that at some point that there would be more enforcement, and that brings in our code enforcement folk. There would be more enforcement of better housing for our community and bringing about a real habitability warranty for our community. We feel that there, a couple of years ago with Judge Gray, there was an implication that we already have a code warranty of habitability because of the fact that we have code enforcement. But we'd like to see a more active code enforcement that makes sure that there's no old houses where people are squatting and that crime has a place to take place. These are the issues that are coming from the policy body that we feel that we've heard throughout our community, that we've heard from our families, that we've heard from people that we work with, but it's just a beginning. We think that the Public Safety Commission is a way to filter and to always be in tune with the concerns of the community as we deal with the issues of crime. And not just violent crimes, but we are aware where crime is beginning to raise its head of any type, whether it is against seniors or property or wherever that's going. And again, it does not take the place of anything that we're working with today. If anything, it is an opportunity to strengthen what we have. This is the report of the final recommendations of the Public Policy Safety Subcommittee.
Thank you so much, Ms. Lita Anthony, Director Sanders.
Thank you, Ms. Anthony. I'll stand before you to present the findings of our Neighborhood Safety Programming Subcommittee. These are our final recommendations. And so if you can imagine a spot in the city where a young person who is in need or a family who is in need can go and access services, period. One-stop shop. We call them opportunity centers. We're proposing that the city funds and operates a number of opportunity centers or one-stop shops throughout the city. And so in discussion, we talked about just different services that we have and different services that others provide or may be lacking in certain areas. And so these opportunity centers would be placed in the targeted wards that we've identified or have been identified, those zip codes that are targeted to reduce crime and have that reduction in crime. Initially, it was proposed that we start with one pilot center, 12th Street Center, because right now we currently do a lot of work on the 12th Street. We see a lot of activity up and down 12th Street, and so we thought that that would be prime area to do a pilot. These opportunity centers would be city-ran facilities serving as the primary intake and assessment points for Department of Community Programs, Office of Neighborhood Safety Services. These opportunity centers, they will during the day function as a day center, whereby which young people who are expelled from school or have been found truant or are not connected to anything, they can show up there and receive day services, receive some alternative learning, receive some credit recovery for those who are behind, maybe have some GED classes, and having an alternative curriculum, for we know that some are not doing well in the standard or traditional curriculum or school setting. So having that alternative setting, having that diversion program or career readiness, getting them a career readiness certificate program, bringing in some of our partners and getting some welding classes during the day, participating in some of our mechanics certificate programs. Also, we'll be connecting with them during the day, trying to identify those individuals and bring them in and have some of that behavior modification or conflict resolution. And why did we say different parts of the city? Because some young people can't go in certain parts of the city. We may oftentimes have services that we are providing at West Central or in the West John Barrow area. Well, individual who is located in Midtown may not be able or may not feel safe or just won't go to that site in West Central. And so we're proposing that we have those in strategic areas in the city. Also, those opportunity centers were served during the evening as intervention sites. In the past, we've ran YIP programs, youth intervention programs in different parts of the city. And so we're wanting to kind of model that, but have strategic interventionists there to serve those hard to reach individuals, those young people who are not showing up for school, who are not volunteering to go to a work program, but with our main focus in that YIP being recruitment, engagement, and empowerment.
Enrichment.
Yes, sir. What did I say? Engage.
Enrichment.
Yes, sir. And so in that enrichment or empowering, it's our thought and our hope is to recruit. So we're seeing young people out on the street, we're seeing disconnected individuals, then we recruit them and direct them to a spot where we know services are going on. We know that if someone's in need of a job placement or career, we know that at the Empowerment Center, they're doing that. And then also we're gonna have some listening sessions. Mr. Tim Campbell has been doing a number of listening sessions around the city. He's been engaging young people, and it's just a chance to let them talk, let them express how they're feeling, let them give examples or ideas of how we can best serve them. And so he's been to our Brandon House Cultural Enrichment Center. He's been to some of the schools, Southwest High School. And so he's talked and engaged some of our young people and just listened, created an opportunity for them to voice their opinion and express some of the things that they're facing and some of the challenges that they're facing and some of the fears that they have. And so having those listening sessions where they are in charge of just giving us information or giving feedback and just expressing themselves of how they're feeling and in hopes that we can kind of curtail some of the violence to where it's not playing out in the streets. But if we can handle it in some of these listening sessions, it could better craft or design the way we're doing our services. Also, youth-led panels with some of our current programs, our schools, holding them on college campuses. We used to run a program called Brother to Brother at Philander Smith College. 60 young men on a college campus receiving services. Every day they had to show up on that college campus and receive services. Bus drops them off at the college campus. They come in and they get homework tutoring, social enrichment, cultural enrichment. But what that did was gave them exposure to a college campus. And so we're hoping that we can do that, but then also have them exposed to some meaningful adults in these opportunity centers. And then we will bring in social workers. We will bring in our social workers and our counselors to help to deal with some of this trauma. And so we would have trauma-informed decisions. And so we can start dealing with it one-on-one, but also in those group circles, or some call them peace circles, where they can actually have sessions with a certified and expert in the field in mediation or counseling. And then also we would provide family counseling and target our parents, for we know that we can work with young people every day, but they still have to go home. And so we want to empower and enrich and engage our families as well. and then also providing training to those families. And then lastly, in those opportunity centers, we want to have some mental wellness. In line with those social workers and trauma-induced care, we want to be able to have some mental wellness activities whereby which we can give those parents some tools by which they can better parent, better serve their families, but also better serve themselves in these opportunity centers. Again, if you can picture a one-stop shop in the city where you can direct a disconnected young person or a disconnected individual and say, go over to 12th Street Opportunity Center. They're going to have this list of services, and they can go there and be certain that they're going to receive those services. We took a tour, I think, some years ago with National League of Cities. They had some in Minneapolis, Minnesota. We did some research. Some other cities have them. They call them one-stop shops. Some ran by the state, some ran by the county, and then some ran by the city. Thank you for your time. That's the report for our Neighborhood Safety Programming Subcommittee. At this time, I would invite Pastor DeMaz forward to speak and to give the final recommendations on the Built Environment Subcommittee.
Well, good evening, everyone. It's great to be with you. Thanks for having us. It's been an honor to serve on this council. Mr. Mayor, Scott, thank you so much. I'll be very quick. You have the slides in front of you, but on the Built Environment Subcommittee, these were the final recommendations, and I should mention that Pastor Billy Burris, Reggie Swinton, and Chanel Smith were also a part of that. And again, not only on the subcommittee, with all the folks on this council, it was really great to work with such people who are passionately dedicated, not just now, but in the past and looking ahead to the future. Just a few things really just call your attention to on this slide deck. The Hope Centers is really not competing, it's complementary to the Opportunity Centers that another subcommittee committed. So two different groups of people came up very similar, with a very similar idea. We kept it on here only to give the board some nuanced options, right? Hope Center versus Opportunity, as simple as a name, but the same concept. We like the Hope Center. It was the Hope Council after all, and we thought that would roll off well, but it's the same concept. The only other thought there on the nuance was where one committee talked about starting with 4. We thought maybe start with just 2, looking at areas of the highest violent crime neighborhoods like 72204, others. In fact, and of course, a lot of champion of 12th Street. I'm a champion of University District, as you know, and certainly in our corner, the Crossroads and all that, we are already operating essentially a Hope or Opportunity Center in partnership with 100 Families, 10 Fitness, Immigration Counseling Services, At-Risk Chess Program, et cetera. And what we found too, it's not just a one-stop shop. Sometimes it happens, maybe a person, young person, what have you, comes for a variety of services to one place. But what we also find, certainly in our work with Cambry Charles, 100 Families, and others, is that it's a place where a variety of services are offered, and many people come there. And from a marketing standpoint, people in the community know you can go to this building for a variety of things. So sometimes it's one person getting a number of services, but Hope or Opportunity Centers can also be that place where you don't have to wonder, where do I go? Many, many services are under one roof that provide for a variety of needs in the community. So again, the Hope Center, Opportunity Center in a name, and or maybe starting in 2 places versus 4. And I'd certainly recommend, we did, in places that are already serving in part like that, just to ramp them up. Of course, Director Webb and I have partnered before, and she's such a champion of food insecurity and the food deserts in our city that we do. But in terms of the farmers market, the community gardens, that kind of concept, just really improving what is already there, really about consistency. That's a lot of things in the farmers markets. In some places, they come in and out. Of course, the food trucks can be that way as too, but developing more consistency, particularly in and around the University District and other areas with the farmers market and continuing to address food insecurity, which also improves the environment, the emotional, the economics of that area. In the next slide, let's see if I get this right. Yeah, there we go. I had been working with Director Wright, look forward to working with incoming Director Lewis on creating a czar, if you will, for the University of Asheville Colonel Glenn corridor. As you know, that's a crossroads of the city. So many different communities come together and or cross through there, for everything from those living without shelter to high instances of drugs and potential for crime, although we've had an aggregate reduction in crime in that community through its development over the past 20 years. It's still a hot spot, if you will, in the city. And of course, downtown gets addressed, 12th Street gets addressed, but you got University of Arkansas at Little Rock, of course. That corner really needs, in our opinion, more focused attention and a czar to deal with a number of the complexities of that area and in our city that come together in an area would be very important. So again, with Director Wright, we'd put forth a proposal on that even prior to this council serving on it. Again, I'd look forward to working with Director Lewis on that going forward. So that's just there. Again, University District Partnership at some points, and frankly, when Joel Anderson was over at University of Arkansas Little Rock, he was such a champion for that community. So many great things happened. I'm not saying anything disparaging about anyone else. I'm just saying Chancellor Anderson was all over it all the time. And University District Partnership was established during his tenure, but that could be a very important thing to revitalize with city involvement, University of Arkansas at Little Rock and other stakeholders there. Branding that area, as you know, you go around the community in the city of Little Rock, you see lots of great logos and flags and flagpoles. We've got this thing called the University District with that flagship college and university there. That area greatly needs to be improved. We recommend also along those spaces, you can go into other areas of the community. You got nice flowers growing and grass. So you drive down University, from 630 down towards Colonel Glenn and beyond. I mean, it's just concrete, it's trash. I mean, and I know a lot of times it gets to money. Like, we can adopt that stuff, right? You can have different entities adopt those little islands and help to pay for it where the city wouldn't have to if it's a money issue. But all of this is not just about economics and crime reduction, but it's also what helps with all that, as all of you know, is just emotions and the emotional uplift of a community when jobs are being created, crimes being reduced, and these kinds of things happen. So all that's related to that environment. And then lastly, just again, finishing up here, I think we thought this is very important. We've seen this work with 10 Fitness. As you know, the Kroger just went out in our community, but we wrote it down like this: provide collaborative training, coaching, and economic incentives that support both majority-owned and minority-owned businesses, and help with a few things. So an understanding of the need of a community, cross-cultural, individual, corporate intelligence, a vision for effective business in under-resourced communities, and also Skunk Works operations. What does all that mean? Essentially this. Think 10 Fitness. This is a good example. So you have the old abandoned Kmart. As you know, Mosaic bought that, brought back to life. That led, and I used to have the stats off the top of my head, 19% reduction in crime, 6,000 people joined, et cetera. And I think roughly $20 million, Joyce Elliott told me one time, has been aggregated over the last number of years there. The point is this: Eric Buckner, who owns 10 Fitness, is a majority culture business owner. 10 Fitness is typically found in suburbs, not only here in our city and around the state. That's not typically a business that's coming to the community of University and Asheville or into communities like that because of crime, et cetera. But Eric had an understanding of the need of that area. So here is a white man who owns this successful business operating in the suburbs around the state, who had a heart and a passion and a vision and an understanding of what a business like 10 Fitness could bring to the community of University of Asheville at that corner. And so in partnership with him, working with him, his own work, as well as work with his church that we did, helped to develop cross-cultural intelligence for him, both for himself as a majority culture man, as well as for his corporation 10 Fitness. And that led to a vision for effective business or a business plan in that community. So working with the church, where we incentivize bringing him there by not charging in terms of square footage rent what it might otherwise cost to rent that facility. We lower his overhead. He's able to make his margins because we're helping to reduce his overhead, and he's bringing this wonderful business of health and recreation and all that's involved into a space and into a community that he might not otherwise be in. And all that comes from the things that are on this board. His understanding of the need, cross-cultural and individual corporate intelligence, and then this vision to develop a business plan that is not the same business plan as is done in the suburbs. And frankly, I'm just speaking honestly, this is what Kroger didn't understand. And you cannot operate in University of Nashua the way you operate in other places. And if you don't understand that and develop skunk works or different mentality and working with both city as well as owners of buildings, in our case, like a church, that's how it all is aggregated to keep a business like Kroger in the community and or bring businesses like 10 Fitness to the community in a sustainable way where jobs are created, people are taking advantage in the ways that we would want to reduce crime and many other things. So this collaborative training can work both for majority and minority-owned businesses, but it takes investment of a variety of things that are listed on this board. But if we can do that, you take that one instance of what's happened with 10 Fitness and through corporate intelligence, et cetera, bring more and more businesses there. I talked to a minority business owner, I'll just finish with this, about, I don't know, 8 years ago, and he's still in the community doing business, but he was so negative. He says, man, I just want to get out of this community, and I tell all my friends who own businesses, don't come here. That is not going to help with crime. That's not going to help with emotional uplift, economics. And so again, a collaborative training, coaching, and economic incentives to work with both majority and minority owned businesses to help them develop products and services at a different business plan, different than, again, suburbs, is what's going to not only keep them there, but bring them there and make it sustainable long-term, which then ultimately helps to build the environment of that community, and with things like we're talking about, reduction in crime, emotional uplift, and the economics of the community that can help with all of that. So again, it's been an honor to serve. Thank you so much, and allowing me to present this on behalf of our subcommittee.
Thank you so much, Pastor DeMaz, and to the chairpersons of the subcommittee, being Mrs. Lita Anthony, Mr. Michael Sanders, the chair being City Director Ken Richardson. Also want to take this time, if you don't mind, if you're here, I'll share a few names. Cumbry, Charles, if you'll raise your hand or stand. How about you? Yeah, just stand. Make sure everybody gets a good see you. Yolanda Harrison, Chanel Smith, Dana Doucette, Tim Campbell, Mallory Visser, Pastor Billy Burris, Reggie Swin, Hall of Famer of Murray State, just recently. I want to recognize that.
Graduate of Central High.
Judge Melanie Martin, Judge Leon Johnson, Mr. Christopher Harvey, make sure, I already said, Pastor Mark DeMaz, Mr. Michael Sanders, Miss Lita Anthony, if you all will stand. First, on behalf of the city of Little Rock, we want to say thank you and give you a round of applause. I see a few, now we're going to members of the board again, just to kind of level set. These are the results of what we've all done, really starting with our community violence reduction plan that was put in action, really starting about the summer of 2020. As we've seen different things increase from that summer of 2020, we leveraged our American Rescue Plan Act dollars. We were one of few cities that actually did that, and we were highlighted nationally by leveraging our American Rescue Plan Act dollars to supplement what this city board has done historically with prevention and intervention treatment by utilizing these dollars for community violence intervention, close to $1.5 million for American Rescue Plan Act. That dovetailed out of this city board accepting the proposal by naming the community violence that we're experiencing as a public health emergency, also something nationally that this city was recognized for, and I believe we all can speak to that. And so out of that, we infused the community to ensure we weren't doing things to the community, but with the community, ensure as we talk about this comprehensive and holistic approach, this is a byproduct of the holistic approach to crime prevention and community violence. And we asked these members of the community who were experts in many of the different areas, and they worked several weeks, several months to bring these recommendations. And we see these members of the community have shared policy proposals for us to consider. Many things are things that I know. You look at the farmers market and community gardens, there have been a lot of great work from City Director Kathy Webb and what she's doing on the state level, and as well as City Director Richardson and City Director Wright, that we know we need to figure out, as City Director Webb would say, it may be more than just a grocery store. We have to think of an array of different solutions as we address food insecurity. But we've seen and discussed these opportunity centers. How do we leverage existing assets that we already have within the city to do more work for our residents? To the Warren Habitability, I know both City Director Richardson and Webb and Director Peck have we've all talked a lot about, and Director Warwick as well, about Warren Habitability, as we know that from a state legislative standpoint, we have very liberal landlord-tenant laws, and ultimately, I know City Director Adcock and Warwick and get a lion's share, as well as City Director Wright, get a lion's share of those calls when it comes to individuals maybe doing certain things that require constituent relations to get involved. And so we have to figure out how we can get more innovative, not only from a city perspective and working with the city attorney to figure out how we can get that done in the confines of law, and then working with the legislature. And then ultimately, the Public Safety Commission and many different things that are part of this report. That's what our residents have shared who are in the field with expertise in many of these different areas. And so I hope what we can do is spend time over the next few weeks really looking at these proposals. I'm sure you'll see some of these proposals as we work with each other, as we are responsive to the community in the new year, to look at a public safety commission, look at what we can do within the confines of law with Warren Habitability, and also advocate at the legislature for that. Opportunity centers, the community gardens and farmers market, the beautification of certain areas within our city. So just want to kind of bring that summation together and now transition to questions. I see Director Phillips.
You hear me, Mayor?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. I want to share your congratulations or gratitude to the folks who worked on the committee. We really do appreciate the work. I had I guess a few questions, and I don't know if this directed as it relates to their recommendations. And I just want them to know that you set forth policy proposals, and I see my role as a city director is working in policy. So you've given us work to do, which is our job to do. So thank you for that. And now it's our responsibility to take what you did and see if we can make it work and make it work quickly. I don't want anyone on the commission to think that this was done in vain or that this is just going to be some other PowerPoint that's going to sit on the shelf. I want y'all to know that for me. In that vein, Mayor, I don't know if this is directed to you, the city manager, or our city attorney. I like the idea of the Hope Centers or the Opportunity Centers. To me, it seems like something that we could utilize our existing community centers for, and maybe, carve out some space or whatever for those different services. My question is, though, I know that we usually have a PIT budget of $5.5 million every year, that we usually do not spend all that money. Some of the recommendations included increasing staffing of an interventionist or a social worker. Do we know if we can use those funds for salaries to address some of the proposals put forth by the Hope Council? And I'm not sure who should answer that, Mayor.
Well, I think with that being a budgetary decision, if that's something that you're sharing some interest in, I'm sure that that's some interest there. from City Director Richardson, who's the chair of the council. I think, one, we could just, the city manager and I could visit with you all individually, and we can look at that. I think clearly the city manager and I are working on the proposed budget. I think that's something that we could be responsive to the community, but of course we want to work with members of the board as we kind of listen to each of you as we're preparing the budget, and we'll have that time actually allotted some today. But I see that as an opportunity, yes. But as to the details, I'll ask the city manager, in particular for utilizing, when we think about the potential, we don't want to reinvent the wheel. We got some assets already, and how do we create coordination in a holistic way, whether it's the Hope Center, Opportunity Center, One Stop Shop, whether that's utilizing, I think what we heard today is at least starting with a pilot at the 12th Street area, whether that's the Willie Hinton Center, or if we go a few miles down the road, looking at Dunbar Community Center, I think we can figure out some area to at the very least start a pilot and see if that's something we want to expand. So I guess the answer is an indication towards a yes, but we just need to look at the numbers.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, Mayor, and I understand what you're saying, and I think there is opportunity to do the pilot, but it only works if we put the people there to make it work. And I guess, and I don't know, maybe we don't know the answer to this right now, but I don't know if there's any technical reasons why we couldn't use existing funds for salaries for the people to do the work that's being proposed.
Sure, I'll defer to Mr. Moore.
Director Phillips, and this is something that Director Richardson has spoken about often. The decision was made that, well, first of all, there's no technical or legal hurdles to use the 5.5 prevention, intervention, and treatment dollars for salaries. I mean, we have staff on salary now that's paid out of that. The philosophy of the city has been that we are going to provide these dollars to, because the decision could have been made that the city, back when we put $3.2 million in the PIT, that the city would create staff and they would deliver the services. And then Director Richardson would tell you that the decision was made that no, we would put those services out to the community where the individuals needed the service. So, and as soon as I saw these recommendations about 2:30, I went directly over to talk to Dana and Michael, because I knew that question would come up is, well, how are we going to fund these recommendations? And I asked the question, had it been discussed at all about utilizing the prevention, intervention, treatment dollars? And I don't think it had, but after seeing the recommendations again about 2:30, that would be an area that we would definitely explore as far as, again, on a pilot basis to one, look at space, because as you know, most of you all know, our community centers during the school year are really utilized. I mean, all of them are. So I appreciate the work that the committee has done, and we'll just have to explore what our options are as we move forward.
Can I add one thing to that, Mayor? Even though Director Phillips didn't request me to speak on this, I think many moons ago, we had one, since I've been on this board, joint school city board meeting, and I requested that based on a workshop at the National League of Cities when the former mayor, John Hickenlooper, became governor. He was the mayor of Denver and he became governor of Colorado. They had a pilot project where they utilized, after school, they used buildings, school buildings. They're practically empty when school closes to do these kind of services that we're talking about. And we talked about that night, everything but that. But we have these buildings in our community, schools that after 3:30, whatever time kids are out of school, those buildings are empty. We have space. We just need to figure out, Mayor and Tom, a way to legally work out arrangements in collaboration with the school districts. And I think what's important, Bruce, with respect to Director Phillips' question is, what type of programs are we funding? Are we reaching the right population, or not hug a thug, but are we funding programs that are just babysitting young people that are not engaging the people who need to be engaged and people who need to be involved? And whether or not we're reaching those who are the most at risk, those who are creating the problems and the issues. It speaks back to, as Michael said, the recruitment part of it, and identification of those who are needing, who are disconnected, who needs to be connected and involved in some type of program. And as the pastor talked about the two different names of those centers, it reminded me of many other moons ago when I proposed the disconnected adult and youth ordinance. That for the longest, up until the last year, there was a group that was identified, and a criteria identified them as disconnected adults and youth. And during President Obama's last year, he changed the description of that group to opportunity youth. So I think the hope and the one-stop center, I think those are fine. I think that Ms. Moore has a history of working with PIT from its inception, even before we had PIT, Mayor, to help us make this a reality. And ideally, we could get involved and partner with our school district so we can do some of these programming opportunities in some of these empty buildings in our community.
No, thank you so much. We'll now transition to Director Adcock, then
Well,
Director Miller.
Mayor,
Oh,
I had one more thing. I'm
you weren't
sorry.
finished. I apologize, Director Phillips.
Yeah, no problem. The other thing I wanted to just applaud the council on the idea of the connection between living conditions and crime in certain parts of our city. I too support the idea of us adding more protection for our residents. I understand the mayor's point. I understand our city attorney's point that the state is not very friendly to tenants or state law. I do think that there are things that we can do. We can, beef up the housing code, our minimum standards in our housing code. I know that's something that our city attorney and I have discussed before. I don't know if he has any insight at this point, but I want the council to know that there are some opportunities to do that. It may not be quite the warranty habitability, but there are some smaller things that can be done, whether that's enforcement of carbon monoxide detectors, quiet enjoyment, other things like that to just make those places more habitable for our residents. So I do think there's room to do those things, and I would request if the city attorney could add that to his to-do list to see how we can beef up our code. And I think it's section 8-408, our housing code, where we can add some of those creative protections that our council is mentioning. I'm very grateful for the work. I think there was a lot of great ideas that were presented today, and I want to do all we can to implement them. Thank you, Mayor. And just as a FYI, I'm about to come to the meeting in person, so I'm gonna log off and I'll see y'all in person in a minute.
Thank you so much, Director Phillips. Thank you for giving us that informational update. Director Adcock?
Yes. In looking at this council members and everything, I feel like there is a big partner with the city of Little Rock that is left off of all this process. I see no person with the Little Rock School District. I do not see people with the juvenile court system on here. So are any of these people connected with either one of those organizations or those groups?
We have individuals who are connected as it relates to our actual youth that are involved in many of those systems. So that's number one. And we do have two sitting judges who are heavily involved, particularly Judge Leon Johnson and Judge Melanie Martin, who are heavily involved in that process.
Yes, but they are not juvenile judges.
But they,
Also, when we look at the Little Rock School District, for years we have built a relationship with them, and yet to me, this has left them completely out of this process. You have a $120 million new high school in Southwest Little Rock. Lots of these things in your opportunity centers and everything, those things was what we was told as taxpayers that we would get in the new high school. You have Goodwill in Southwest Little Rock that has all of these services as an opportunity center. You have Metropolitan High School that the school district has set aside to serve this same. I would like to see us go back and include the school district in this whole process and have them a say and a part in doing this. They have 5 schools that they have closed. Those schools are sitting empty right now. The windows being knocked out of them and everything. If we're looking at putting services in community, let's look at these empty school buildings. I think that this report is wonderful. I thank the people who have worked on it, but I think that we are being far short-sighted if we do not include the Little Rock School District in plans that we're making for the students that they are planning on education, on educating. Thank you.
And thank you so much for your feedback. I'm just, so you.
Can I comment, Mayor?
Hold
very-
on one second,
very
Director
quickly.
Director Richardson, hold on one second.
Just real quickly.
Just 1 second, Director Richardson, just 1 second. Just to help you understand, Director Adcock, just want to make sure you're aware. Number one, we're going to always work with the Little Rock School District, and our Chief Education Officer is working hand in hand. Our current superintendent, previous superintendent shared how much partnership they've experienced over the last 4 years with us. And so out of these things, those are opportunities to work with them. But what we wanted to do, again, is what you see out there in the crowd are individuals who are really in the trenches of all these issues that we're experiencing. And quite frankly, many times our youth that are between ages of 15 and 25, unfortunately, they're not in school. They're out in the streets and they're looking at other alternatives. And so this is what this committee was looking towards, which does not negate what you just shared. I just want to make sure you understand the realm of understanding. And so I want to make sure you know I'm not debating or arguing. I want to make sure you understand that many of the youth that we see every day that are dying aren't spending time in school. They're not being a part of those great programs that you're discussing. We got to first get them and save them, and then as we can redirect them to so many of those instances. I just wanted to make sure you are aware of that. And again, when we talk about many of the folks who are A, repeat offenders, B, that are between those ages of 15 to 25, many times they've aged out, or because of the acts that they've committed, they're not going to our juvenile judges. They're going to see Judge Leon Johnson. They're going to see Judge Melanie Martin. That was the reason why they were included. And so I just wanted to make sure you just had that understanding of those selections, but we will take your feedback under advisement.
Then let's remove this 18 to 25 from our youth, because if we're going to cause the youth to be looked at with 18 to 25 years old, I don't think that's fair to our young people.
Yes, ma'am. We'll take that under advisement. Director Richardson?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. You spent far more time than I and used far more words than I anticipated on using to direct Director Adcock's question. This is by no means a panacea. This is a work in progress. The feedback that you gave the group, we welcome that. We'll take that and we'll utilize that to help improve what we're working on. But this is not the panacea. This is not the final project, guys. This is going to be an ongoing project if, in fact, we move in the direction we're trying to move in. So, Mayor, you spent more time and used more words to address that than I would have. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, Director Richardson. Director Miller, then Director Webb.
Thank you, Mayor. And first, let me also thank the members of the Hope Council. I think I've forgotten what HOPE stands for, but HOPE. What does it stand for again?
Holistic Outreach Prevention in every neighborhood.
Okay. And I know
We just took off the neighborhood, just so you know.
and I know a number of the people who served here, and I want to thank them for the service. It's hard work. giving up time to have these meetings, and they ought to be commended for it. And certainly, Mayor, I want to echo one of the things that you said in your statement after they made their presentation, that we have a chance to leverage existing assets, city assets. And I think that's important. Certainly, before I got on this board, I recall the city wanting to reach the neighborhoods and get out of the neighborhoods. So they created neighborhood resource centers, and I see them all throughout Ward 1 on different parts of the city, and I think that's great. I want to make sure that we leverage those neighborhood resource centers again. They're in the community, and so if we can bring those assets that we currently have, make sure they're in those communities, because those were people, they recognize those, they see those, and as I recall, when it was presented to the city, they were supposed to be many city halls and many resource centers so people could have those assets and use those. And certainly in Ward 1, I hear from a lot of different neighborhoods in addition to this 12th Street. I mean, Hanger Hill, Richland, Granite Mountain, College Station, South End, Love, Goodwill, Hope, South Asher neighborhoods. They all want the same things. And I think the resources that we have there with those neighborhood resource centers can help us. Certainly as it relates to the Little Rock School District, I think the partnership there and certainly some of the points that Director Adcock has made are certainly valid. I know they have resource officers, they have social workers, and certainly a big building that's now abandoned in Ward 1 is old Booker Junior High School, Booker Middle School. And certainly I want to encourage you, Mayor, and I know that you reach out to the superintendent. I know our city manager reaches out to the Little Rock School superintendent, and I think that's extremely important. And we need to make sure if the Pulaski County Special School District, who borders some of our neighborhoods, certainly get to utilize also. The resources there with the Votech Center and Metropolitan, as Director Adcock was saying, these existing assets need to be leveraged and brought to this situation to the best that they can do. And so after-school programs, I think they're great. I benefited as a youth from an after-school program when I was in elementary school. The school was open after the classes were out. And we went up there and we were able to utilize those services. And it saved me a lot from the streets. And so I think there are a lot of existing assets. I think these ideas that the Hope Council has brought to bear, we need to look at those seriously, and then we need to implement what we can, certainly within the structures that we have existing already. I think a lot of these things certainly can help us. And I want to applaud you, Mayor, for reaching out, and let's try to do some things unconventionally, all right? We have serious problems going on in our community. As I've heard Director Richardson say, we can't police our way out of them. And so these type of efforts, I think, need to be applauded, and we need to utilize these as much as possible. So I want to thank you for your leadership on this. I want to thank the Hope Council on this. And I certainly believe that the ideas we're hearing from a number of our board members here, certainly as it relates to existing assets and the point that you made about utilizing existing city assets, we need to make sure that we go forward with those. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you so much, Director Miller.
Can I make one comment and follow up to what Director Miller just said?
Yes, sir.
One big advantage for being able to cooperate with the school district is that there are privacy laws that would protect what goes on if it is a student school project that would not be protected if it was a city project. One of the things that was highlighted here a minute ago was we would have these places where people with special training would go and listen to the youth and listen to their problems. But if their listening is ever recorded or written down, then if it's a city problem, it's subject to disclosure. It may not be subject to identification based upon the age of the individual, but it's subject to disclosure, which by itself means, how can I trust anybody to help me if I'm telling you something that's scaring the bejeebers out of me at home and you can't keep it secret? Whereas schools have abilities to do that cities do not. So that is just a very important reason to make sure that this is a close hand-in-hand operation.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Director Webb, then Director Wyrick.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll echo my colleagues and thank all those who served on this, including my seatmate, Director Richardson. My thoughts were going along the way that Director Miller was going. And I've got a lot of questions. I'm only going to ask a couple, and I'm going to send the rest of them in writing to you. But one of the things that you all said was, and I appreciate that this is not the end point, this is the starting point. And what do you see, if you can, and it could be Director Richardson or you, Mayor, as sort of a time frame, or City Manager Moore, that will be like creating this list of not only the city assets, but the assets in the current programs that CYF or community programs is funding? Is this going to be like a 6 weeks or 2 months or 6 months, or what sort of time frame do you see that those types of things are going to happen?
Well,
But Director Webb, to me, it's trying to predict the end to some of the social ills that we have to address. I can't tell you how long it's going to take for us to deal with unemployment or underemployment, how long it's going to take for us to deal with homelessness or a number of other social ills. So it's going to be a work in progress. We had to put a timeline on it. We're doing it as long as we have these issues and as long as we have the resources to deal with these issues. So I think that it's going to be a work in progress. I don't think we put a timeline to it, nor could we put a timeline to when we're going to end homelessness or unemployment here.
Director Richardson, let me be more clear then, because
Please.
the question was, the timeline was creating the list of assets that the city has, CYF and our partners have. I think Director Sanders talked about Pulaski County and state programs. And when we see all of those assets listed together, that's going to help us address the problems better. I'm very aware that we can't put a timeline on when we're going to solve the problem, but if we're going to vote on things.
Yeah, and I'll answer that. So again, this is a result of many, many different weeks of our community residents working. This is the beginning as we start moving forward. The timeline, one, I think from an asset standpoint, that takes time to understand and figure out which asset we would use. Clearly, if we go with the pilot, that's a little easier, but even with that, we have to look at what's going on there now, what interruption may happen by including something else. And so the city manager and I will take the time, and the Office of Executive Administration will take these proposals, of which that we'll try to forward proposals to the city board, of which there may be some proposals that the city board in itself, members may want to take certain proposals and forward to the city board for approval. But as it relates to the assets, I think, it's going to take, we're in the middle of the budget season right now. We have to look at least some of the things, whether it's the social workers and things, not social workers, but some of the strategic workers that has been in this proposal. We need to look and see what we can do. And Mr. Moore and City Director Richardson just kind of shared that concept of how it's been. Just because it's always been that way doesn't mean it has to continue to be that way, but we have this opportunity to kind of figure out how can we do things differently as we address these ever-evolving issues in our city. So to be specific to your question, I don't think there's a timeline. What I will say is to the residents, you all spent time doing things. We don't want this to be a presentation that we just put up on the wall. That's not our style. We're going to work towards some things collaboratively with the city board and figure out how we can get it done, if not all of these things. And so I think one of the first things that we'll pursue is transitioning this Hope Council to a public safety commission that can continue that work and continue to work with staff, team members rather, I hate using that word staff, but team members to ensure that we bring these things, that we vet them, we put pen to pad, understand the numbers. So I would see we'll try to pursue a good share of this in collaboration with the city board within the next 90 to 120 days.
And one of the things, Mayor, that we haven't done, I think that we should be doing, and we've done it in the past. One of the things we should be doing is utilizing these funds that we're committed to this work as leverage to attract matching funds from foundations, from the state, from the feds, from the county. So taking these funds and building up on these funds and using how we're committing these funds as leverage to attract matching funding or additional funding to increase our resource base. So I think that's one of the ways we can grow our work.
Sure, and what we'll do, again, Director Webb, to kind of, not necessarily put a pin, but also to acknowledge where you're getting at. I think, Mr. Moore, let's just add at one of our clearly we're going through budget, but at least in January, what we probably can do is an asset map maybe on the existing assets that we have, what it would look like if we did have a Hope Center, Opportunity Center. We could bring both Pastor Demise and Mr. Sanders back to kind of talk through their subcommittees back to kind of talk through Hope Center, Opportunity Center. We can have more time to have Q&A and more information as well, and leverage our policy discussion time for that. And so we can kind of get some questions answered as well as we're building through that. I think, you had a second question, Director Webb?
I'll defer some of my questions. Thank you.
Okay. And I would say, Director Webb, being that Mr. Harvey and Mr. Sanders spent a lot of time, they would probably, if you'll, we'll figure that out. Just if you'll send me those questions, we'll make sure you get those answers. Director Wyrick, then Director Computers, then Director Phillips.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to thank the Hope Group for bringing this information to us. It looks like they've delved into some of the major things that we see in our city. And I agree with Director Miller and Director Webb. We need to look at the assets that we have in the city already, alert centers, resource centers. We had a vision for those years ago that they were in targeted communities where assistance was most needed. And as of this time, I don't think all of the alert centers have resource specialists in them. I think they're being divvied up by just a few of those personnel. So I would think that we'd want to look at those again. The school district, I think, is important. I attended a meeting where they were talking about a program that they had, and I can't think of the name of it. I'll give it to you, Mayor. I want to say it's TAG, but I don't know that that's the right acronym for it. But it deals with children in the school district, whether they're kindergarten all the way up to the 12th grade. If they seem to be having issues, acting out, problems, etc., then those children are sent to social workers. They're worked with, they're followed. And I was concerned about parents, as this report highlighted, and they even go to the parents to see what kind of background and things that they have. So I think we need the school district involved in this because they already have some kind of program going on that might be helpful with whatever the end program looks here. We've talked about community schools. A lot of the things that they're addressing, I think community schools will take care of. They highlighted that our rental inspection program and our code enforcement program are not good. We've known that for a long time. So not only will that help with the crime, but it'll help with our neighborhoods as well. So that seems like two programs that we need to beef up and follow through with. But a part of that is the legal system, because many times we get a lot of things hung up in the legal system. And the individuals are given, more months, more weeks, more whatever. So somehow that probably needs to be shored up. I'm aware of a problem with truancy in particularly our high schools. And I've talked to a number of police personnel. The resource officers say if they're off campus, it's not their issue. And so we're resolved to talk to the 911 centers and talk to them about kids that are not in school. Now, why is that important? Well, A, they're missing education, but B, they're getting into situations that are not good for them and possibly could end their lives. In one particular high school, I'm not going to say where it is, but we have kids that are going off campus every day from 11 to 2. They're going off campus and they're doing things like drugs, etc. One young lady was found almost unconscious, and an ambulance had to take her to the hospital. She had taken some sort of drug and was violently ill. So if they're not in school then, and they're on their own, then they don't always make the best choices. At one time, we had a truancy program in the city. And I know Tom Carpenter was heavily involved in that truancy program. Maybe that's something that we need to pick up. And with the truancy program, we can identify what these kids need. Is it a parent situation? What is going on with these children that are not in school? So I think that's a piece of this that we need to add to it. And then I heard Ms. Anthony talk about that there's a lot of people that are willing to work on these particular issues. If there's a lot of people out there, then we need to gather up a list of the individuals that would be involved, be it nonprofits, whomever it would be, so that as we do these work groups or we divide and conquer these issues, then we have a list of participants that would be helpful in resolving some of our issues. Good report. I understand it's just the beginning, but it's identified a number of things that need some attention. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Director Wyrick. We'll get to that. Actually, Director Moore, if you will just, by the first week of January, maybe January the 6th, if you'll just kind of have a report on all the assets that we have in the city that could be utilized for the opportunity and Hope Centers and neighborhood resource centers.
Mayor, we'll work hard, obviously, with the budget. There's going to be a lot of focus on that. And a lot of times we just focus on public assets, but there are a lot of programs that we already fund, and Director Webb mentioned that. So I really believe that we need to come up with a comprehensive list. We'll get something in January. I can't promise it by the first Friday in January.
Well, actually, I meant the first board meeting. Well, that's what January, what's the first board meeting?
January 3rd, January 10th, January 17th.
Let's try to do it by January 17th.
Okay, thank you.
Give you a little time. Thank you. Director Campiris, then Director Phillips.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank your group that got this together. I think they've got some exciting thoughts going on. But I will tell you, as Ken has said to me in the past many times, this scares me to death. Ever since we started the PIT program, we have had new programs that have come in, and we've said this is the greatest thing since ice cream on a stick, and then we don't like it afterwards. So I would caution us as we move forward. First of all, I think we really need to think hard about, before we bring this group in and make them a whole new public safety commission, how that works with the children, youth, and family, because I have this feeling there's going to be a pot of money they're going to both be competing for. Secondly, as Ken has said on numerous occasions that he used to work for, any program that we create this time, because we have hit singles with PIT money and we need to hit home runs from now on, that we need to create programs that are verifiable, that we can say are really doing what we want them to do. We don't need to say this looks good, feels good, this sounds good, but how are we going to say that if we create X program over some period of time, we prove that it really has validity to it and it's helping kids? And the third thing I would ask is, did this group look at similar programs in other cities that have a track record where you can say they have really done things? So if you look at what Virgil brought up and what Joan and BJ brought up, we've had a series of programs that we've created since I've been on the board, all of which have helped a little bit. But we have all these different facilities that really don't add up to what we want them to do. So as we do this, I think we need to go slowly and very deliberately and make sure that we're combining the assets we have, creating programs that we can verify, either by putting things like Ken used to do in the past in, and we really need to look at cities, other cities that have done this. We don't need to reinvent the wheel if somebody else with a city of a community of 200,000 is doing it. There's lots of communities that have similar problems, but it again scares me that we have this, we're going to get this, we've got this great program, and I've been on lots of great program ideas that have not done what we wanted to do in the future. So verifiable, look into what other communities have done, make sure that if we do develop, and as the board develop and say that we need to have a public safety commission, how does it work with this children's, youth, and family group? And how do we move forward on all of these fronts? Because we don't have an unlimited pot of money to spend on this, and we have to be wise when we do it. We're lucky that we have $5.5 million to spend each year on this sort of thing, and most communities don't. And I will take, equal amount of blame that we've not done the job we should have done in the past with that money. So let's don't squander this opportunity with new hope and with new ideas and not do the right thing with it.
Thank you so much, Director Compures. And just one comment, Director Compures. On page 4, you'll see that the Public Safety Commission continues the community engagement work and where it would not be seeking funding from CYF. And so I just want to make sure you saw that on page 4.
I saw that, but all I can see is moving forward, you having two organizations that have similar ideas and one pot of money to pull it out of. And that's a dangerous situation to get success, in my opinion.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Director Phillips.
Thank you, Mayor. I was trying to listen when I was in the car on the way over here, so I may have missed this. But the request for the city manager to have the assets prepared for us, are we going to coincide that with actual policy meeting where we can continue this discussion?
What meeting is that, January 17th, Mr. Moore?
Mayor, my thought, we have 5 Tuesdays in January, and to get back to Director Webb's thought about a time frame, right now we're looking at that 4th Tuesday for the joint meeting with CAW, which would be the 24th. And so in my mind, I was shooting for the 31st, which would be an agenda meeting and a policy meeting to have not only the asset map, but I think there was a request to have Pastor Maz and Mr. Sanders to come back and talk a little bit more about their committee's work. So I was, again, budget, holiday break a little bit. And
Are,
then
are you leveraging Director Phillips to go from the 17th to the 31st?
I am.
That's what it sounds like.
And honestly, Mayor, I'm okay with that. I just want to make sure that whenever we get the asset map, it's accompanied with a time for us to have a discussion on this specific issue.
I agree, and that was my sort of goal.
Okay, okay.
We can change it to the 17th to the 31st.
Thank you.
Mayor?
And I have one more thing.
He still has the floor, Director Wire. We'll come back to you.
And the other thing, I do appreciate my colleagues' comments about being deliberate and taking time and not squandering resources, but I also think, time is of the essence, and we have to make decisions and act on behalf of our residents and on behalf of the people who did the work. So I know even later today, we're going to talk about additional money for our police officers, and not to say they do or do not need it. We're going to have that discussion. But when it comes to that type of crime prevention efforts, we don't hesitate. When it comes to doing something that's impacting communities, we want to study and be deliberate. I think that's inconsistent and not for the best of our city. So me personally, I want to make a public request to the mayor and the city manager for our budget discussions as it relates to this $5.5 million, that we include some team members, Mayor, I don't want to say staffing, team members that could help fill the roles that have been identified by the Hope Council. I understand Office of Executive Administration is going to present a budget to us. We're going to talk about it and discuss it and make changes if we need to, but I want to publicly make that request so we can move in that direction, because whether it's a pilot program, whether it's at the resource center, it's at the community center, whether it's at the Little Rock School District, current building or old building, we're gonna still need people to do the work that was highlighted. And I think we have the resources to do it. And there's no reason, at least in my opinion at this point, where we can't have the discussion about adding staffing to help do the work, no matter where the work is being done at. So I'll make that request, City Manager and Mayor, for our budget discussion whenever that happens in the next couple of weeks. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Director Phillips. Director Wire.
I just wanted to follow up with Bruce about his work that he has to do between now and the end of January. You're going to come up with a list of assets. And do assets include the potential partners, nonprofits that we can utilize with these programs?
Yes, ma'am, because I think that, once you start looking through it, and I think Ms. Anthony even mentioned it when she said, there are a lot of people in the community that want
Right.
to help. So I
Right.
think we have to include, maybe not names of programs, but categories of
Right.
programs. So yes.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that was what you were considering an asset, because I think it is. If we've got people ready to go to work with programs developed, then we need to consider them on our team, part of our assets.
Correct.
Thank you.
Agree.
And Mayor, I think I had my hand up just to dovetail Director Phillips' point. And BJ, we do have foundations that we've worked with. I don't want to call them by names, that we utilize. And they provided funding that's matching dollars for some of the types of programming that we put in the community. But I want to remind my good friend Dean that when we came up with this $3 million for PIT, that wasn't an arbitrary amount. That amount was based on what it would cost the city to hire 135 new police officers over a 3-year period, 45 officers each year. That's how we got the $3 million. And we got down to 2.5 million during the recession in 2008. Never put that other $500,000 back into PIT. So theoretically, we should be having $6 million committed to PIT funding. But the $3 million wasn't an arbitrary amount, guys. That was based on what it would cost the city to employ 135 new police officers over a 3-year period. And I agree with everything that you're saying, and you made some great points, because you're a part of Futures Little Rock, and you guys put in place a conceptual framework that made it possible for a watershed or BCD to get funding to address those issues right where those problems were happening, right in the community where they were located. You guys did a wonderful job with that conceptual framework, and I think that we need to make sure, as Bruce has said time and time again, we may need to have Director Phillips, an intermediary, to do the evaluation of these programs and make sure we're engaging the right people, make sure we're having some kind of impact and we're doing what needs to be done. That may be something else we need to look at, Director Phillips. I think you're correct on that. But I think that, and in whole, and I'm trying to find it, Bruce, and I want you to please help me find this because I saw it about a month ago, Dean, a memo from Mayor Daley in 2004 who gave us a 10-year update on PIT and its impact on the city of Little Rock. Now, of course, at the time, we had Robert Wood Johnson Foundation funding to support our support centers, and Andy E. Cation Foundation funding to support New Futures for Youth, which was the intermediary at that time. But I want Bruce of us, if we can find that memo that Mayor Daley did to the citizens of Little Rock from 1994 to 2004, you can look at the crime rates, you can look at the engagement. It's a thorough memo, and I cannot find it for the life of me, but I think everything you said speaks to that, and I think it's a reminder that we need to make sure we keep that and make that our focus as we move forward. And we're not providing funding to add new positions at City Hall. I mean, I was kind of somewhat concerned and disturbed when I heard YIP described as youth intervention programs rather than youth initiative project sites, and anybody else that we hire that's going to be a new YIP coordinator will be an employee of the city. So how are you going to do crisis intervention in the streets with a badge around your neck? That sends a real different kind of message to the young people in the community, particularly somebody brought up Hanger Hill, Director Miller. And I think some of our officers would tell us that the recent uptick we had in criminal activity, particularly violent criminal activity, happened with beefs between Hanger Hill and Monroe Street and some guys from Barrow. And they would also tell us that these guys from Pine Bluff are now linking up with Hanger Hill. We need to be mindful of things like that and keep our eyes and our attention on things like that and address them proactively rather than reactively, playing chess instead of checkers.
Thank you, Director Richardson. Director Campiris, and then we go to Director Hines. All right, Vice Mayor Hines.
Yes, Mayor. Director Phillips, in the spirit of keeping it 100, I take a little exception with your comment that we're trying to slow down, to compare what we're trying to do with our police department that's an existing organization. And I've got some questions that have been brought up about the Hope Advisory Council, and I appreciate their work, but a lot of it seems duplicative of stuff we're already doing, especially to create another committee of the city that is essentially doing the same work that our Children, Youth, and Families Division is doing. So to say that we want a second look at this and make sure that we're going in the right direction when we're charting new path versus what we're doing with our police department, I don't think are it's apples and oranges. And we talk about not being able to police our way out of this. What we can't do is arrest our way out of this. We can police our way out of it, but we can't do it when we're 93 officers down in our police department. And what we're trying to address with some of these issues is retention in our police department, recruiting in our police department. We've been down this road already once since I've been on the board. We went from being down 50 to 75 officers to being fully staffed when the mayor took over to being down 100 officers again. This is not a different merry-go-round. And to say that these two things are one and the same just is not accurate.
Can I respond, Mayor?
Director Phillips.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate keeping it 100. I do it all the time. For clarity, when I said being deliberate and taking it slow, I was referring to using some of the resources for the staffing, which is what I requested from the city manager and the mayor as it relates to the asset study on existing issues. I agree with that. That's why I asked the city manager, would his asset study be accompanied with a policy discussion? So I agree, there's no need to duplicate efforts. So I disagree with what you said that I said. But more importantly, though, as it relates to this and the police, these are the same things. We're talking about crime prevention. We're talking about taking care of our communities. And there's multiple ways to do it. And that doesn't mean just only police. It doesn't mean only holistic outreach. It means both. And what I was questioning is why we were be so quick
to add resources or anything to our police department when they need it. And I'm not saying that they don't, but there's other ways to address issues. There's other ways that we need to address issues. And I don't want us to be so deliberate and so in tune with studying something that we don't do the work that needs to be done. We can do two things. We're a big city of grown men and grown women who can make more than one decision at a time. So we can support our police department if they need to be supported, and support the recommendation from the Hope Council. This is not an either or. Don't try to pit them, or we're trying to pick one over the other. That's not what I'm doing. I don't think that's what anyone's doing. We have the resources to do both. So I just want that to be clear to Director Hines, my colleagues, and the members of the Hope Council. Thank you, Mayor.
Director Miller.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to make one observation, because I certainly don't want to not recognize the work that the Hope Committee's done, the recommendations and all the comments that's being made, that we don't want a PowerPoint. We just don't want it to sit up. We want to act on things. We want to do it quickly. I can tell you that when I got on this board in October of last year, so it's been over a year now, it's been 13 months, there was a presentation made by CNA, had about 80 plus recommendations in it that dealt with what we can do in our police department, what we can do differently. There has not been, to my knowledge, a single thing done on that at this point. We have had recommendations which, Chief Helton put together a committee. I hadn't seen a report from that. This seems like that has been a presentation that has been made and nothing has been done. So when we talk about having a presentation and we want to have work done on it, and we want to act on it, and we don't want to sit up and collect dust, there is a perfect example of a presentation that was made. Nothing has been done on it that I am knowledgeable about, and it has not been done. So, I mean, I'm a little frustrated, when I hear something like that we'll have a presentation and we want to act on it, and then we had a presentation that's 13 months old and I hadn't seen anything done on it yet.
Well, Director Miller, I'll make sure that we have Chief Helton come back before the board, because you are correct. There were several, even more than several recommendations. One of the lion's share pieces of the recommendations is the discipline matrix on how our officers are disciplined, and that has been implemented. There are some other things that I know, particularly as it relates to one of our community resident leaders, Kathy Wells, that she's been intimately involved on some things, and there's been a work in progress. I know she's had some conversations with the police departments. I do want to make sure you are aware that the CNA report has been, those recommendations are being implemented. It is a work in progress, and I'll make sure we get an update to the city board to let the city board know where we are in that process. But I do, just to address it, want to make sure, one, I'll take that it hasn't been back before the city board, but I do know for a fact that LRPD is working at, in particular with the discipline matrix, that was I don't know if I would say a good chunk, but it was a significant piece of the recommendations. And there's some other things as it relates to, I know exactly what it is from Ms. Kathy Wells, but I'll get that to you. But we'll get in the new year, we'll get an update to the city board. Very similar, as you shared, I want to, again, as we talk about different things, as we kind to realign, refocus how we do policing. We've seen that. I think the city board was very appreciative of the CPSM study, which it shows us different things. It gives us a chance to really look inside, look inward, and see how we can get better as a department. And that gives us a playbook on what we move from. So one, from the CNA report, it is being worked on, because just like we told the independent review committee that we wanted to get that work done, because we are held accountable to them that spent that time. And so it has been done. It's not 100% done, but we'll give a status update in the new year for that. just like eventually, we're gonna also, just to kind of get ahead now, to the city board, we also will do a status update on the CPSM study as well. So,
And Mayor, this is my last point. I'm one of the ones who say we can't police our way out of this. You can't police your way out of self-hate. You cannot police your way out of vacant lots and boarded up homes in communities that look like war zones. You cannot police your way out of unemployment unless you're gonna hire him. And I wanna thank Bruce. That's a segue to thanking Bruce when we had a Ban the Box or Move the Box campaign. Bruce took it further, had a Ban the Box where typically the first question on the application is, have you been convicted of a felony? With the exception of the police and fire, and correct me if I'm wrong, Bruce, or finance, that question is no longer on a city application for city jobs. That's helped tremendously. We can't police our way out of that because if we're not employing them, I don't think we can do that. I think we need to have a paradigm shift with respect to public safety and address it through community building and build up some of these communities, because all these homicides, for the most part, are happening in this box. Let's look at some of those common denominators in those boxes. Boarded up homes, vacant lots, disproportionate number of liquor stores, convenience stores that sell alcohol, a number of things that the police cannot police. We cannot police our way out of it. I don't care if we put 1,000 police officers out there. It's not gonna be able to address those social ills that we're talking about, guys. Let's be real. And I wanna end this on a positive note, Mayor. Your predecessor, prior to him, Bruce, hijacking our Sister Cities program, we had a Sister Cities program that involved our YRP sites. We had a young lady, I think we were still with Newcastle, England, Bruce. And we had a young lady who was in one of our gang intervention prevention programs. We took a group of kids in Newcastle, England for over a week. Now she's a school board member. She's a school board member. She was in a gang intervention prevention program in the 90s. Now she's on the school board. Those are the kind of opportunities we're talking about giving young people rather than policing our way out of them. She's sitting in the school board room, not in the jail cell, Mayor. So hopefully that's positive, and I don't have anything else to say about that. I want to thank our committee members again. You guys did wonderful work. Hopefully this is something we can build upon. I don't think my colleagues' questions are indicative of them not supporting what you guys are presenting. I think they're just giving us some things to think about and work on and build upon, and I welcome that. I know you guys too. So thank you guys once again, Mayor.
with that being said, for the chair of the whole council, let's give the whole council a round of applause. Thank you all. If you all want to take advantage of the rest of the evening, please feel free. We won't be ashamed. We won't feel bad if you transition out. All right, members of the board, we're still in our agenda meeting. Board member, are there any questions on items 1 through 11? I know Director Adcock, I know you had several questions. We'll start with you, Director Adcock.
Okay, on item number 2 and 3, I noticed on item number 2, which is Ward 7, the funds are going to come from the targeted community development. But in number 3, you have housing, and it's going to come from a different funding. Could we have a report on the targeted community development, how much money has been spent by each ward, how much money is left? And I would like to, I talked to Director Wyrick about this house, and how did she choose this house of other houses, and she told me she did not have any part in choosing this house. I thought the targeted community development was going to be driven by the ward directors of the 4 wards that was involved. So I would like some clarification on the targeted community development and how houses are being selected and why they're coming out of one program and then in another ward coming out of another program.
Director, Mr. Moore.
Sure. if you read the, or even the resolution, on item 2, it says utilizing home investment partnership program funds. So if you remember when we started talking about target community development, one of the things that I said, and even some of you all said, well, we do a lot of work in this area, in these areas. So I thought it was incumbent upon us that when we have something that is in a targeted community development area, that we put it on the agenda, that okay, this is one of the areas that have been targeted, but this is not using any of the funds that have been set aside. We'll designate those differently when they come forward. So if it clearly says these are using home investment partnership program funds. So these are CDBG funds that we're using for items 2 and 3.
In both 2 and 3 are CDBG funds.
Correct, and it's the same wording in 3 as far as utilizing home investment program funds.
Okay. The next one, Mayor, is item 6.
Yes, ma'am.
It seems like we are continuing to do business with businesses that are outside the city limits of Little Rock, outside of Pulaski County, and in lots of cases outside the state of Arkansas. Several years ago, Mr. Moore will remember that we looked at trying to do more businesses with the businesses in our city. And I would like for us to go back and look again at what we can do to do business with more of our local businesses at this time instead of going out of state. I know that lots of times we use state contracts, but this seems to be a company maybe in Pine Bluff. And I would like to see us go back to utilizing our businesses in Little Rock and in Pulaski County as much as possible.
Can I speak to that, Mayor?
Mr. Moore?
You're correct. It was my idea in 2012, after the sales tax passed, that we wanted to do business with Little Rock businesses. You all passed an ordinance that gave extra percentage points to companies that had resided in Little Rock. And Jay would remember this. As soon as we did that, Conway said, well, we're going to do that too. And North Little Rock said, we're going to do that too. And so all of a sudden, there was a collective, well, we don't want to stifle Central Arkansas business. So the ordinance was revised and taken off the books. So we did try it, but then our Central Arkansas counterpart said, well, we're going to do that too. And Little Rock businesses weren't going to be able to compete on the same playing field in Conway and North Little Rock. So we did away with that.
But then I would like, Mr. Moore, for you to get us the figures of what we're doing, spending money outside the state of Arkansas. If we're going to say, okay, let's do Arkansas, let's look at what we're spending money outside the state.
And we'll provide that. And I will tell you, it's a little, could be a little misleading because, for instance, when we buy a $1.5 million fire truck, it's usually off of a state contract or a regional contract. And so, but we'll provide that information. And we do a lot of business. We'll also provide, because we were tracking it with the sales tax that was passed, so we can get an update on how we've done with the 3/8 cent as far as businesses in Little Rock and outside Little Rock and also out of state.
I'd like to know Little Rock and outside of Little Rock too. Do you want me to go ahead with mine, Mayor, or give someone else an opportunity?
We'll want you to keep going.
Okay, item number 10. I noticed that there was not a dollar amount on item number 10, where on most all the other ones, there is a dollar amount. So before we vote next week, I would like to have a dollar amount on number 10. Which is the Convention Bureau.
$350.
On number 18, this is where we are going to increase the fees. Now, on one of these tonight, we're looking at dropping $500 not planning, but improvements to the homes. And instead, we're going to raise the fees on the higher businesses of $5,000 and more, and yet we're dropping the 500. I cannot support dropping the 500 because these are the things that impacts our neighborhoods. Yes, 500, it can be, as one director told me, changing a window, but also 500 can be a parking pad, it can be a fence, it can be some small things. And in some of our neighborhoods, particularly in Southwest Little Rock, it's very important to have an inspector look at buildings that people are putting up outside, parking pads, and the fences. So I do not support changing from 500 to 5,000 and then taking the fees and increasing to our other businesses that are over 5,000. I think that I'd rather see us go ahead and leave it as it is on that one. So is there any reason that 5,000 was a magic number?
We'll ask Director Collins just to give a brief
Okay.
report on that item. Someone will get Director Collins.
Get the information, okay. And then on number 19, I just had a question on that one because this says cadets, and usually we think of the cadets as under 21 years of age. So is this the regular police officers or is this a cadet program?
Well, I believe Major Tyrell may still be here.
It's the people in the recruit school, not the cadet program.
Okay, so it is recruits.
Correct.
I would like to see us change that word from cadets to recruits to make sure that that is what we're doing. And then my last one is item 23. And I would like to have some information on this. How many years have we done this with the municipal league? What has our results been? And why does staff recommend approval on this? And that completes my list.
Thank you. I believe, Mr. Moore, you were going to share an update on item number 11 before we go to Mr. Collins. Director Adcock.
Item 11,
Item number 10.
10, yes.
The city matches the Convention Bureau, and it's in the resolution. It's they put in 350,000, and the city puts in 350,000.
Is it the same amount as
It
it has
is.
been being?
It is.
And how long since it's been increased?
I'll have to look at that. I'll have to find out,
Okay.
but it's been pretty consistent.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so Mr. Moore's address number 10 for you, Director Adcock, and you see the number 11. We will recognize Mr. Jay Cheshire, the CEO of the Little Rock Chamber. We'll bring him up here shortly after Director Collins on item 18.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the board, Director Adcock, the 505,000 that you're asking about, the 500 is the minimum amount so if a construction costs $400, then a permit is not needed. That's the minimum amount. 5,000 is what we're wanting to increase it to. So we're actually raising that amount to 5,000. So individuals that are doing work up to $5,000 that's the limit. They're not required to come and get a permit except on certain conditions, like if they're building in a floodplain or if they're looking to do something in the right of way, those types of issues, then those still are permits. But in general, those smaller construction jobs, 500 was a limit that was set decades ago, and cost of construction has increased drastically over time. So you asked if there was a rhyme or reason. We felt like we sat down, Mr. Givens and myself, and tried to determine what would be a reasonable amount of somebody doing home repair, home maintenance that would accommodate that, and what would that dollar amount be. Now, that dollar amount is separate from other permits that we're looking to waive and not require, and that is residential fences, less than 7 feet. We're not looking to permit those anymore. We're not looking to permit residential roofing, for somebody to re-roof their house. We're not looking to permit those for that. Storage sheds or sheds in the back up to a certain square footage. That kind of aligns with the Arkansas Fire Prevention Code. So those are some of the other permits that we're looking not to get to help out with smaller stuff that people do at their home for repair. And so fencing, so even if the fencing goes over 5,000, if they wanted to repair their fence as a residential fence and less than 7 foot in height, then they could do it their entire property. That 5,000 doesn't kick in. The fence is still exempt. And the reason we went for 7 foot or more is when you get over 7 feet, there is some structural issues with wind, and you really need to change your posts and other structural measures in your fence for that installation.
Mr. Collins, I think this is going to cause some decline in our neighborhoods because lots of people go out and put up anything for a fence, go out and put up any type of roofing and everything. And I think we're going to see a decline in our neighborhoods by lowering this. I could see going to maybe 2,000, but to go all the way from 500 to 5,000, that's a big jump in protecting our neighborhoods.
Understand.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now go to Director Wyrick.
Thank you, Mayor. I have questions on several items. Item number 2, the one that Joan addressed, or Director Adcock addressed, I'm happy to have some renovation rehab in Ward 7, but I have some questions about that. I went out and looked on the internet on one of those realtor sites, and it says that this property sold for $70,000 on July 6, 2022. And I don't know if the city bought that or what that means. It also said that the estimated value for this property was $114,800. It also said that it would be ready to go with estimated rehab or preparation of $6,000. And it said basically the $6,000 was for staging and landscaping. So we've got a contract here for $65,000 to put into this house. And so I'm wondering, okay, what are we really paying for with this $65,000? If I've got a website that says we only need to put $6,000 in it to make it go, why are we spending $65,000? So what are we getting for $65,000? And when you look at it, for $114,000, the estimated monthly rate would be $343 a month. And I don't know if that's affordable. I think it is. I don't know if that's the right amount, but what would this house rent for? And I'm assuming it's affordable housing. It's 3-bedroom, 1.5 baths, 1,114 square feet. So I don't know who needs that. There you are.
Before we go to
There you are.
before we go to Director Howard and Director Wyrick, I just want to just do 2 things. Just I don't want to say housekeeping, but just want to be respectful of some folks' time. Are there any questions from members of the board on item number 10 or the item that references a Major Tyrell? If not, I want to make sure they know they can excuse themselves. They don't have to give a comment right now, but I know they've been here since about 4 o'clock.
Yeah, Mayor, I've got a comment, a question for Jamie on 18 before he leaves.
No, not Jamie, but he has to stay the whole time. I'm talking about.
So Jamie's not leaving?
No, I said Jay Cheshire.
Okay.
Major Tyrell.
I may have one for Major Tyrell or that resolution that we're talking about, the cadet.
Sure. Well, Mr. Cheshire, you can excuse yourself.
Good to see you.
Major Tyrell, if you'll come up.
And it may be less for him than, it may be more for Dean. And we're talking about the one where Joan referenced the cadet program. That's the one I have. And Dean, it's probably more of a question for you. And I have to be real careful, because when you ask for an objective assessment of the police department, you get labeled as anti-police, which is not the case. You never get that label when you ask questions about those programs we just talked about. So let me be real careful in terms of how I ask this question, because whenever you do for an objective assessment, for some reason you get labeled anti-police. You won't get the same label saying you're anti-jail people about a question you guys just asked. So Dean, that salary amount, what's the rationale for that? What was that based on? Can you help me? Are we losing potential officers to the state police because of that?
May I interject? Mayor? Yes, sir. I think this puts one of our commanding staff in a very difficult position as far as answering any questions regarding item 19. The city is actively negotiating with the Fraternal Order of Police, and we clearly have to do something, and that is our plan. Now, is it finalized? Have we presented it to the union? We have in some instances, but we're not done. And usually, what I would do would be to notify the board that we've successfully completed negotiations. And the one thing that I think is also important, and we have to factor it in, and because it's not only with this raising recruit salaries, but you also have to keep that that balance or that gap that we have with our other officers. And again, that's all a part of our negotiations. So I'm not sure what your question is.
My question, I thought I changed it to Dean. What was the rationale for that amount? The other part of the question you just asked for me, what kind of impact would it have on those who have some tenure, some seniority? And what was the rationale for us raising it to that level? Are we losing potential LRPD personnel because we're not matching what the state is paying? Has there been some kind of evaluation we looked at that suggests that we do this? And Bruce, I thought I changed it from Major Terrell. I don't want to put him on the spot. I asked it back to Dean. What was his rationale for doing this, and what do we expect to gain? And what kind of financial impact is it going to have on us, as you just mentioned? And does this apply, can this or will this apply to non-sworn personnel, unsworn personnel? Does that have an impact on it? So from a police department budget perspective in total, what kind of impact are we looking at with respect to this if we adopt this? Or is it just the cadets that Joan mentioned a second ago?
Let me be real clear. I think that we had a report that said we are 78 officers down. We have a report that said, or we have the knowledge that every community around us is raising their salaries. We have the hardest, most dangerous city to work in. We have our neighboring cities are putting out messages recruiting our officers. We have a report that you listened to that said that the only way we're going to survive right now is have our officers work 12 hours on and 12 hours off. I had the experience that you've had when I sat in the room with Les Hollingsworth, that it's not an either-or situation. It's that we have to take care of both. We have to take care of what you've worked on, but we also have to get enough officers on the street to start taking care of it. You've got to have both components. Now, this is not a proposal that says that this board is part of the negotiations. That's the mayor and Bruce's responsibility.
Correct.
It's the union's responsibility. But it is an acknowledgement that we have to do more to save the officers that we have and recruit officers to this department. And it is, I think, very short-sighted on us to spend 2 hours listening to programs that we can do that I support, that you support, that both of us supported for years, that we negotiated up to almost $6 million worth of money, and to not think that we need to be proactive in how we keep and recruit policemen. And that's my whole motive, that it's, you have to have both components to get protection and make people feel good in this city. And you're 80 officers down and it doesn't work. You had a person from out of town in Los Angeles who said, you keep doing this and you're going to break your officers down. They can't do what they say. We don't have the police cars that we need. And it is the realization that we have a report, as Virgil said, that we haven't acted on the report before. Here we have one that's got 3 things on it that says we need to do. We need to have a safe room that works. We're going to address that. We need 150 cars. Bruce has found a way to get 100 of them. We'll get another, and we'll modify this to get 50 of them. But we have to be supportive, in my opinion, of getting police there. So my motive is nothing more than trying to make sure the city is safe. And it's not going to be safe only by PIT money. It's safe by both, wait a minute. It's safe by having policemen on the street that are safe, well-paid, and not killing themselves having to work 12-hour shifts. So that's my whole motive.
Understood. And as your friend, I would say, Dean, are we 80 short because of the salary, or are we 80 short because we haven't changed our recruitment strategy?
We have to retain and recruit. It is a joint, just what Bruce said. It is not, and I'm not in the negotiations. I don't want to be in negotiations.
Do I?
That's the job of that gentleman and that gentleman. But I do know that we're getting our, you know what, eaten up by the surrounding communities, and no one wants to come to work here because it's too damn hard.
Well, that's why it was a question for me, because we have people that drive here, that come here from Bend, Bryant, Conway, Cabot, from some of these surrounding homogenous communities that come and work in Little Rock. And I just wanted to know, was this based on us having some kind of objective evaluation that we're
It
not
is an
able-
objective evaluation that we had for an hour and a half.
I remember the presentation.
And they came in here and said, and I read the whole report again, and the 3 main parts are, we can't get enough policemen, we're 80 down, they all need cars, and we don't have a safe room. And there's 20 or 30 more recommendations, but those are the 3 things to me, and that's the reason I put those 3 things in. Now, please understand, both of you two, I'm not negotiating a contract, and I'm not asking 10 of us to negotiate a contract, but I am just acknowledging the fact that we're not competitive and we have the hardest place to work. So there you go. And so how are we going to take care of the problem? You take care of it by addressing the issues, and the issues are the 3 that I put down there to me.
Well, my question is not, I hope they're not being considered confrontational, because they're not. It's expressing my curiosity because of a couple of things I just mentioned in terms of people coming outside of Little Rock to come work in Little Rock. And I'm supportive of law enforcement. Let me say that again. Wendell, slow this down. I am supportive of law enforcement. Back from the time I graduated from the Citizens Police Academy in 1994, when Joan and BJ and Dean and Bruce, you guys remember Lou Cardell was our police chief then. I'm just curious in terms of what's the overall impact? What kind of impact will this have on officers who've been employed 5 or 6 years? What kind of, does this apply? Does it apply to?
Director Richards, I got to interrupt you because I interrupted Director Wyrick to allow for
Mayor,
Mr.
I'm
J.
happy
Chester.
to have this discussion continued because it is very important. I appreciate you doing that, but I'm happy for them to have this dialogue so we can hear it as well.
Thank you. And thank you, Mayor. Does this apply to employees that are unsworn, that are non-sworn employees? Or is just those who are sworn in as officers? Or to get to Jones' point about cadets, however we want to label them, what kind of financial impact overall is this going to have on us?
And that's an issue that there are two men in this room that will bring us a budget and tell us. But I know from a report that we commissioned, there were 80 officers down, and the gentleman, and I'm sorry, cannot remember his name, told us that if we continue what we're doing, we're killing our officers by making them work too hard, mentally stressing them out. And I've watched the same thing happen during COVID with nurses in the hospital. And what happens is they're not efficient in their job, they quit their job, or they go someplace else. And we have to take the responsibility, in my opinion, to address that issue, or we're not going to be able to solve this problem. And I'm fully supportive of PIT and what we need to do if we use it wisely and we use it and have programs that we can monitor. But I'm also passionate about that we have to get our force back up where it is, because that means if we do, then we can have COP officers out there. Right now, we don't have one because we don't have enough police. We've got, well, I won't even go the numbers that I know because it'll scare people to death. But all I'm saying by this is we've got to acknowledge the fact we've got a problem. And that's all I'm saying.
And so since we're on this subject, first and foremost, let's acknowledge to every member of this city board and myself, we all are already supporting our officers. We are funding our officers. We recognize that we do have, at today's date, 80 vacancies. We recognize that. We also recognize that we have close to 200 of our 594 budgeted positions, close to 204, 202 officers that are at least 15 years. We have a workforce that is very experienced, but also, as we know, as those officers go from 15 to 28, we know for a fact that no matter what we do, from recruiting to retention, we're going to lose 25 to 35 officers every year, no matter what we do. Let's be very clear. No matter what we do, we will lose 25 to 35 officers every year. That's the reason why we have to continue to recruit. I want to recognize Major Tyrell, who's done a phenomenal job. In the midst of the pandemic, we have maintained a recruitment class each year. I also want to make sure the board members know there are several cities in this state, in this nation, that they went a year or years where they did not have a recruit class. So let's understand the environment that we're in, that it is hard and challenging to be an officer. It's hard and challenging to recruit officers. So there's no panacea of idea. You're right, Director Compures, and you're right, Director Richardson. It's a both-and strategy. And even with that both-and strategy, we're still gonna lose 25 to 35 officers no matter what. So I want—
Mayor, I agree with you completely.
Director Compures, I was speaking and I did not interrupt you and Director Richardson as y'all went back and forth. But I did interrupt Director Wyrick, and I did apologize for that publicly, and she gave us the clearance for you all to go back and forth. What I want to share is, Director Compures, I know you say you don't want to get in the business of the negotiation with the unions. I would share, based on the feedback that I've received from the unions, that if we move forward with your recommendation, I think everyone understands that we want to pay our officers more. I can publicly tell you right now, as the person who's involved in the negotiations, we will do that, subject to your board approval. However, while this is a resolution, it's an intent, it's an acknowledgement, this is a management function. It is not a policy function, because we are in the middle of negotiations right now, and by passing something, That gets in the way of our negotiations, and we now, the city, are negotiating in public. So I'm asking that you allow the Office of Executive Administration, who's literally in the middle of negotiations right now, presenting our budget, and I ask that we just defer it, take it down, because if we move forward,
I would love to defer it for another 2 weeks,
well, we may not have the budget in another 2 weeks.
and then I can defer it again in 2 weeks.
I would ask him at least defer it to December 20th.
That's fine.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Clerk will defer Director Compuris' ordinances to December 20th. Resolutions. Thank you so much, Director Compuris. And again, to the board, we recognize, I want to assure the board, we are going to fund number one, we've already funded our officers. I want to be very clear that close to 52% of our budget goes to public safety. And we will continue to fund our officers and remain competitive. And I can assure you that we will, if not, we will remain in the top seat as far as municipal law enforcement within the state of Arkansas. Director Wire, we'll go back to you if you still had questions.
Oh, yeah. I do.
And again, I apologize for earlier.
Where's your
And
director?
Major Tyrell, unless there's any more questions from Major Tyrell, you're excused.
I don't know how much Mr. Howard heard, but I went through some things that I looked at on the internet. The property sold for $70,000 on July 6, 2022. I don't know if the city bought it or somebody else bought it for $70,000. The estimated value of the property was $114,800. The estimated price to rehab the property or bring it back to $114,000 is stated as $6,000, and it said it was for staging and landscaping. We have an amount of $65,000 for rehabbing this house, and I don't know what that $65,000 is for. I don't know if we took bids on it to get to that $65,000, but what is the $65,000 going to do to this property when I've read that they only need $6,000 worth of work?
Let me take your questions. Well, first of all, good evening to the members of the board, mayor, city manager. The first question is back, I want to say probably May, you all passed a resolution for us to purchase that property for $70,000. That's the
So we're
first
the
thing.
owners of it now?
Correct.
Okay, cool. That's a good thing.
Yeah, and so the next thing we'll do, once we purchase the property, we'll do an assessment on the property. We do a description of work of what needs to be done to bring the house up to code because we're using Home Investment Partnership Program funds from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. That's a requirement. So when you bring the house up to code, you have to go in and do all sorts of work. So I don't know the information that you received, but we did put it out for an invitation to bid because it's construction. And the bids that we received back based on the script of the work that we put out was $65,000. That was the lowest bid.
That was the lowest bid. Okay, well, this was an internet site that talked about this property, and they said all it needed was $6,000 worth of work. So I'm going, wow, so why are we paying $65,000 to bring it up to speed? The other question I had was, it said that the estimated rental property, the estimated rent for the property would be $343 a month. That was at $114,000. So what would be the value of this house? And is it truly going to be affordable for someone to purchase?
Yes.
What would the amount be, monthly amount?
Well, what we've seen in the area based on the sales in the area, based on the comparable sales and the CMA, which is competitive market analysis, the sale of that house would be $130,000, and it's very much affordable. The affordable price range in the city of Little Rock is around $200,000. That's around the medium part, especially with what is going on today. We do provide subsidies to these homeowners, so if we listed the house at 130,000, which I know we won't have a problem selling it, we could provide up to a $20,000 subsidy, so they would get the house for 110,000. So their note would be well under $1,200 a month.
Okay, I think it estimated the houses on either side of it were about 179,000. They were all within that range. There was one across the street, I think was 60,000, something like that. So, it's, the market should be good for it, I would think.
Yes.
Okay. It sold in 2016 for 175,000.
2016,
In 2016, it sold for 175,000.
that property did, are you sure? Because,
I'm reading, I read it on the internet. Okay?
yeah, it didn't sell for that price.
In 2016, it said it sold for 175,000.
No, it didn't. But I'll send you the county records on it.
Okay. Since you're up there, item number 3 is for the properties at 4701, 4705, and 4707 Charles Bussey Avenue. I looked at the same internet site and found that 4704 and 4709, 4704 is 199,000 estimated value, and 4709 is 150 value. So those amounts look reasonable for what's in the area. The question I had though is the person that's going to do the work. I went out and looked at them on the internet, and they had a rating build Zoom score of 0. And so I'm curious to know, have we ever done work with this company before? Do we know anything about this company? Are they utilized in the city for building houses? Because they said that with the Build Zoom score of 20, the issue could be not having any work experience in the community, customer feedback, responsiveness, or licensing. So what do we know about the company that we're fixing to award this to?
The first question I can answer, this is the first time the city has done business as far as new constructions with HCS. They are a company that has done business in the city of Little Rock. They currently construct houses off of West Street over in West Little Rock Central off of John Barrow in that area. They're developing several houses. They do have to provide this information to our procurement office. They have to provide work history in the past of what they developed. They have to provide licensing information to the procurement office to bid on these properties. We put it out, invitation for bid. Once the information comes in, our procurement office checks to make sure that the information is correct that they provide. And so they have pulled permits with our permits division and planning and development department.
Okay. Do you know what this Build Zoom score is?
No, ma'am, I never heard of that before.
You need to go on the internet. You'll find out lots of information. Okay. But anyway, the 0 score, do you know about it, Virgil?
No, I'm not familiar with that calculation.
Okay. Anyway, I just want to make sure that they are, good company. We're going to get what we're paying for. Item number 4, which is not you. Thank you. Appreciate
You're
it.
welcome.
Item number 4, we're using Presidio. We're using them off the state contract. And I'm just wondering if there was a particular reason why we're using Presidio. It's to put video system, et cetera, in the police department in their meeting room, potentially set up for a command center at some point if they needed to. That's item number 4. It's video conference equipment.
Correct. And the police department looked at various companies to provide this equipment that would also be comparable to the equipment we already have, and this was the recommendation. But we can get you a written report on why Presidio.
Okay, I was curious about that, why we picked Presidio. Okay, item number 5 is the car wash. I went out and looked at them. Are they the Riverfront Detail and Wiggy Wash at 3101 John Barra?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, okay. And so this is a contract for $140,000. It looks like they do a lot of detailed work there, but they also have, I guess, a drive-through wash area that they use. I couldn't see what their prices were. How many cars do we think that we're going to run through there at $140,000?
Walter, if you want to come up and address that. And I sent the board a pretty detailed report on November 18th, just kind of, because this had come up before, and you asked if we could look at maybe hiring.
Yeah.
And so I kind of explained that. And on the detail, as I said in the report, most of that is LRPD when they've had people in the back that do not so good things to the cars, and so that's why we have to go in and have them fully detailed. But Walter, you want to add something?
So the way this works with the $140,000, we're giving the money to Fleet Services. Are they going to bill back the departments that use the car wash? Is that how that's going to work?
Yeah. Good evening, Mayor, board members, and city manager. So yes, Fleet tracks it, and then they bill the individual departments. So yes on that. And then, like in the last few years, we did COVID cleanings when we had exposures. There would be processes to clean the car that there was a lot more volume in the last few years with that service, and then you have the drive-through service.
Was it a detailed service or is it a drive-through service?
It's both.
Both?
It's both.
Okay.
Yes.
And so whoever goes through there, whatever department goes through there, then there's some kind of tracking, and then you all will bill back to them.
Right. So what happens is they pull up, and there's an RFID, little tag on the windshield, and they know that it's a certain unit number, and then at the end of the month, they send us a report, and that's how it's billed.
Okay, so is that what item 7 is for, the GPS for Fleet?
No, that's completely different.
Okay. I didn't understand why we needed GPS for Fleet Services.
Well, GPS is a telematics for all the city vehicles, or a good majority of them. They provide location for the departments where their staff's at. They provide idling time, greenhouse gases, maintenance issues. It's plugged into a car, and it's a completely different service than the car wash.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, well, I had a question about that, so you answered that. Okay, what's the estimate of number of cars that we're gonna get cleaned for $140,000?
It's usually do about 100 a week, and then that's about it. But for the drive-through service, and the details, the more involved details vary according to, the police use it a lot when they have the car gets chemicals in it, or people have accidents in the car. That gets utilized where they have details, where it gets a lot more detailed interior cleanings.
So Director Wyrick, the report I sent is that in 2021, we had a total of 7,724 vehicles. And to date, in 2022, we've had a total of 5,890 vehicles.
Okay. The detailing that you're talking about, thank you, Bruce. The detailing that you're talking about, is that on a per car billing, or is that included in the $140,000?
It's per car. There's a line item that they charge per car. When they go, every time they drive through, they don't get that service. That's a specific service where you have to get an appointment.
So that's going to be above the $140,000?
No, that's included.
It's included in the $140,000.
For instance, in 2021, we did 74 full details. year-to-date, we've done 80.
Okay, okay. All right, and then I have another question on item number 6, and I don't know if this needs to come from Fleet or what, but we're purchasing 17 Ford Maverick pickup trucks for various departments and for other purposes. I don't know what the other purposes are, but I'd like to know where those 17 Ford Maverick trucks are going, what city departments they're going to.
Okay, we'll provide that.
Okay, and then items 12 through 18. This is amendments to follow codes for fuel gas, for plumbing code, for electrical code, for mechanical code, for swimming pools, and for property maintenance code. And then also, item 18 is the permit fee schedules. Okay, so that's different than these. But those that I just outlined, usually when we go to a different code, we socialize it with the businesses in the city that are going to have to change what they're doing permitting wise. Have we done that? Are they significant enough that it's going to have an impact on the businesses in our city?
Director Collins.
I don't want to put any undue burdens on people, especially if they don't know they're coming in to get a permit. Oh, well, you got to do this electrical code. You got to do.
Several of these codes are already adopted at the state level. So they are already adopted per state. They have to do it per those codes regardless whether we adopt them or not.
You said some of them. Which ones are
Yes.
some of them?
The plumbing code, if I miss one, Chuck, please remind me of the electrical code, the mechanical code, the gas code, the ones that are not the swimming pool code, and the International Property Maintenance Code. However, on the International Property Maintenance Code, it is referenced and we didn't bring it before the board yet. The building code a new building code is being adopted by the state, and it references this International Property Maintenance Code, and so that one's in there. So these are just taking what we have already adopted in the past and update them to the current code. It doesn't change the process for the ones I called for other than the pool code. So the swimming pool code is something that we haven't adopted in the past. We do have a pool permit, but it is more of an electrical and a tie and a zoning clearance permit, and this would be adopting the actual swimming pool code for the city of Little Rock.
Yeah, I thought we'd already gone through this with the National Electrical Code a couple of years ago. We brought it up to whatever the state standard was. In fact, I thought we did most of these. Have they revised their standards?
That is correct. Okay. That is the update. And we've, instead of, and we could have presented this time, but we didn't. Really, at some point in time in the future, when the update, we really just need to update the codes to align with the current adopted state code. So when the state adopts the code, then we would adopt it automatically by ordinance, and we wouldn't have to come before the board for these adoptions every time, because they are adopted by the state, and they have to be built by those codes throughout the entire state.
So if the state has one code and we have another code, who do the electricians and the plumbing folks?
They go by the state code. We cannot differ from the state code. We can be more stringent on some items, but they have to go by the state code. We cannot adopt a different code. We have to do the state code.
Right now today, for example, the electrical code is the 2020 National Electrical Code. So when they come in and get a permit from us for electrical code, they're already following the 2020 National Electric Code?
Currently, right now, our system is a 2017. I can't, Chuck, when did they actually adopt it, the electrical code? It's already been adopted.
The electrical code will go into effect to January 1st for the statewide.
But today, if they come in here, they're looking at a what year electrical code?
Could you repeat that, please?
I probably didn't ask that.
Yes, we enforced the 2017, any permit that's issued up to January 1st.
So we're not enforcing state electrical code.
Yes, ma'am, we are. It's the 2017 code we're under right now.
Okay.
January 1st, it will go to the 2020 code.
Okay,
And
so
then
we're just
three
trying to
years,
get ready
there will be
for.
every 3
okay.
years, there's a new code that comes out.
Okay, so we're just following what the state's saying we have to do.
Yes, ma'am.
And up until January, when the 2021 comes out, all of our electricians, our plumbers, et cetera, they're already following the electric code. We're just updating our ordinances to reflect that that's what they have to do.
Yes, ma'am, that's correct. And that's with all of our the state code that they have adopted as well.
Gotcha. Okay. Let's see, I think that was, yeah, that was it. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Wyrick. We'll now go to Director Phillips.
Thank you, Mayor. Just real quick on number, I guess number 10, I guess it's city manager, but he stepped out, or maybe, Mayor, you know. I know a month or two ago, we, as a board, voted to, I guess, place the River Market Hall back into our Parks Department. And I just wanted to make sure that this resolution doesn't impact that, or if it does impact, how it impacts it. So I don't know if you know that, or if we need to wait till Mr. Moore gets back.
It does not impact that.
Okay. That's all I needed. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Hines, then we'll go to Director Miller. I'm sorry, Director Miller.
This question's on item 1, Mayor. Is anybody from Public Works still here?
Can we see if John's in the back, or Mike, or David? John's here. Thanks, John.
Good evening, John.
Hello, sir.
Hey, on item 1 with the Madison Valley drainage, so how is what we're approving now different from what the original that we kind of took a second look at? What's going on with it now?
The original scope of the project is still in place. What we've done is additional work that's going to be done on the adjacent properties to the east. There's 2 property owners, and we've worked extensively with both of those owners to develop a plan to build a berm that's going to keep water that's flowing across those properties in the drainage paths continuing north and not going towards the infrastructure that we're replacing. So we're keeping it in 2 separate flows, and that's been negotiated with both of those owners, and also a price negotiated with the contractor.
And then on the, I guess the issue is, so we're still planning on changing out this culvert?
Yes, sir. We feel that is important to the future of those homes and protecting those homes as much as possible with the system that we have in place. Then with the berm that we're going to put in place in any future development of those adjacent properties, further improvements can be made to keep that water separated from going to that one location.
Okay, because I was just questioning it, maybe a little caution, better part of valor on this deal to see how the berm works, but you guys think that we need to go ahead and do both?
Yes, sir. We think that it'll make a big difference in what's being impacted there.
All right, and then what's the expected start of construction on this?
Our contractor is ready to go. I think it's just a matter of, it'll probably be sometime in the first quarter of next year, just with getting contracts and all that process done.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Director Miller?
Thank you, Mayor. I really wish I could have jumped in when Director Howard was still at the, Mike, is he still here?
We'll get him. Director Howard, are you still here? He's right here.
Well, there he is. Thanks, Director Howard. This was a couple of questions on 2 and 3. I want to make sure I understood that. Let's start with 2 first. As I read this, and I think maybe some of the questions could be answered with the write-up, because the write-up and board communications on 2 stated a lot of things specifically. It's 1.5 baths, and it stated the square footage, of which in 3 it didn't have that. But let's stick on 1 for a minute. Stick on 2 for a second here. As I read this, you say it's an amount not to exceed $65,000, but there's a 20% allowance for overages. Does that 20% go up to the 65, or would that 20% on overages be applied to the 65,000?
It would be applied to the 65,000 if necessary.
So in an amount not to exceed 65,000, that's not really correct, because it could go up 20%, 13,000. It could go up to 78,000.
That's correct.
So I think this language here, the way this is written up, probably needs to be cleaned up a little bit, because when I read the board communication, it sort of contradicts what it's saying not to exceed 65,000.
Yes, and I think it's written like that, and I would have to go back and double check the previous BOD communication, that we sent out before. And usually it's when we put it into format and it goes into the city attorney's office, then they'll make that correction. But I'll go back and look and see.
Okay, that's just a little cleanup on that. So let's jump to number 3 as it relates to these houses, because these are vacant lots at this point.
That's correct.
And the city owns these properties.
That's correct.
So what is the square footage of these properties, and what's the number of bedrooms and the number of baths?
The properties are, vary between 1,350 square feet to 1,482. I don't have the exact addresses for the 2, but it's 2 that is 1,480 squares.
Could you pull up the memo that we sent on the houses? It had all of because there was a request to defer these a few weeks ago, and then I sent a separate board memo that had all 3 houses listed, the square footage and everything. But we'll get that out to you this evening.
Yeah, I appreciate that, because when I'm looking at number 2, and in my simple head, it's 1,114 square feet. You divide that by 129,000 cost, it's 116.25 a square foot. So I'm trying to figure out what the square footage on these other 3. What's the cost on those are going to be? And certainly once I get that information, I can figure that out.
Yes, the houses, those houses sell for $160,000 if you want to look at the sales price per square foot. But if you're doing just what the cost per square foot, it'll be a little bit different, because the actual bids came back, I believe, at I think one was 181,000, other was 2 was 181, other one was 185. So the 2 that was 1,480 square feet would be the division that you would use. So you can use 1,480 square feet to get your cost per square foot.
So what's the difference in 181 and 185?
One of them has a front-loading garage versus the 2 has rear-loading garages.
Let me do some quick math. So it comes out about 125 a square foot on those? Okay. And when you did appraisals on these, is that how you looked at it? Appraised it based on the plans and specs?
So typically, when we bidding out properties, we're not gonna be nowhere near as far as when we doing appraisals, as far as on the properties that we actually put out to bid. There's no way that we're gonna get that. That's why it's important that we use federal funding on these projects. We basically, when we do affordable housing in these areas, based on the construction costs, we're gonna take a loss. That's a part of it. What's important is when we do appraisals on these properties, when we sell them to homeowners, that the properties are appraised so that they can have have mortgages that back these properties. So when we sell these properties, we know that they're gonna appraise at 160,000 or more.
So the city just takes the loss?
Yes.
So certainly on the write-up on these, and I guess city manager, in that more extensive write-up that we had, it specified that $20,000 in subsidies would be going to these two, just like the
It did.
write-up on,
Yes,
on
sir.
two.
And 2 is a rehab versus a new construction.
So the rehab, seems like rehab sometimes costs more than new construction.
That's correct. We just got a good deal on this property. That's why we purchased it back in May.
Okay, well, I certainly appreciate that. And HCS, I think you explained who that was prior to, I think that was in response to Director Adcock's question. So those are questions that I had about that. I'll go back, City Manager, when you send that more detailed write-up, and I can take a look at that and maybe revisit some more before Tuesday on that. Thanks.
That'll work. Thank you.
That's all I have, Mayor.
Thank you, Director Miller. Seeing no other questions, we'll move into discussion on items 24. Ms. Emily Cox, will you start us for 24 and 25? Discussion items? Or 24?
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, members of the board. On September 6th, the board passed a resolution outlining how just intent to spend $13.35 million of the second tranche of the American Rescue Plan Act funds. And so, and part of that resolution stated that after 90 days, there would be a review of the unallocated amount of ARPA funds, and that unallocated amount is $5.5 million. So the slideshow, slide 2 just lists everything that was included in that resolution from September. And then slide 3 talks about the review. And then on slide 4, these are previously proposed items that were not included in the resolution in September that we wanted to bring to your attention for discussion and consideration. And so those include $1.5 million for infrastructure as economic development, $1 million for affordable housing, an additional $500,000 for community violence intervention programs, $1 million for drainage projects as targeted community development. And then the resolution from September included $2.35 million for some capital needs that the Public Works Department has, and they are getting estimates to make those purchases, and they actually, it looks like they will need an additional $200,000, so that is a new item that you've not seen before. And then also there are some additional costs for some IT upgrades that are eligible for ARPA funds at $200,000 as well. So that list is $4.4 million. And I am happy to answer questions and hear your discussion about the unallocated $5.5 million.
And let me,
1 second, Director Miller. Director Adcock had her hand up.
Mayor, it's on another subject. I have an item I'd like to add to the agenda, and it's been passed out to the board.
Okay, we'll take that up here in just a second.
Okay.
Director Miller, then Director Webb.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm sure I'm overlooking the obvious here, but it's 5.5 million of unallocated funds and this totals 4.4. What am I overlooking?
The 4.4 list those are just items that we had brought to you before that were not included. And so it doesn't add up to 5.5, you're right.
So there's $1.1 million that,
Well, there's 5.5 million that has not been allocated.
yeah, I understand that, but what I'm saying is you have 5.5 million. We got a total here of 4.4 million.
So Director Miller, from the previous, if you recall, the Office of the Executive Administration made a proposal. Director Wright made another proposal that had many contents of the first proposal. And so in the Office of the Executive Administration proposal that had 5.5, 1.5 or 1.4 was transitioned from that proposal, and that proposal was for food deserts, made an amendment from City Director Kathy Webb, and that was included in Director Wright's submitted proposal, and so that's why you see 4.4.
Okay, so it's not 5.5 that's unallocated, it's really 4.4.
It is 5.5 million that's unallocated. The 4.4 is just kind of outstanding items that we had put forward for your consideration. And there was in the initial proposal of the second tranche, we proposed having some unallocated in reserve.
What am I overlooking?
Director,
But the
well, no, not Director Phillips. If anyone next is going to be Director Webb.
My apologies, Mayor. I'll raise my hand.
Thank you.
Director Webb.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is not for Ms. Cox, but I have some items that I would like to put forward for consideration. And if it's okay with the board, given that I've also asked every week about the unfinished items for the budget, and I know that we still have that to talk about, I would like to hand this out with the hope that it can get on the agenda for next week. And I would just like to say to the board what's on there and why. That would take about 2 minutes after Ms. Cox finishes, if that's okay.
Yes, ma'am.
She's done.
So am I up?
Director Phillips.
Thank you, Mayor. I thought I understood this, and then Director Miller and the mayor's conversation confused me. I understood there's 5.5 unallocated. There's 4.4 categories that are being presented to us. There's 1.1 that's not included in this that either is for reserve or that we can add to the 4.4. Am I understanding that correctly?
So there's 5.5 that's unallocated.
Correct.
And then the September 6th resolution said that in 90 days, the board would review.
Correct.
So the list of 4.4 is just a list of requests of items for consideration to allocate among the 5.5.
Right, for us to decide.
Understanding you have your own items that you'd like to bring forward.
Right, for us to decide to vote up or vote down. But there is, if we decide to spend the entire 5.5, there's another 1.1 that's not listed in the proposal, or is that, am I misunderstanding that?
I think you meant to say 4.4 and you said 5.5. So if you decided to fund the 4.4.
No, let me back up. There's 5.5 unallocated, correct?
Correct.
You are showing us items that constitute 4.4 million, correct?
Correct.
We can love it, hate it, love some of it, hate some of it, but at the end of the day, we got 5.5 to work with.
Correct.
That's okay, that's all I'm saying. Thank you.
So there's another 1.1.
We don't have to accept what they propose.
So can I make a stab at this?
I get it now. I'm good now.
I don't.
On page 4, you can, and it's intentionally titled this way. It's previously proposed items not included in Resolution 15783, which is the resolution that passed, that you all said, come back in 90 days. So this is the list that was a part of the original list. And so we didn't add anything else. That's why it's titled this way. And that was, you know, and the goal after the 90 days was to, again, bring back this list, but also have you all's input on the list. So as the mayor said, we didn't recommend, or at that point, it wasn't recommended to spend the entire tranche. We knew there was some still left, but that's why this is titled this way. These are just the items that were previously proposed and never did take up the entire 5.5.
Okay, thank you. I'm a little slow, but I got it.
Thank you, Mr. Moore.
And I think my hand is up, Mayor. I guess I'd ask Mr. Moore answer my question. This is the amount that we deferred for 90 days, is this correct?
Correct.
The amount that the mayor presented to us to vote up or down on, and we made, I think Lance made a motion and it was seconded and it passed to defer this for 90 days. So this is that amount that was presented to us that night.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Richardson. Director Webb.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have been encouraged to bring things forward. And so I went through the budget book that we got, in September, I think, and I looked at all of the capital needs that the departments listed. And then I made some phone calls to find out if some of those things would probably be included in department budgets or if there were already funding sources for some of those things. I did some research to find out what things would be acceptable to be put forward that would qualify for ARPA. I talked to a variety of people, including folks at Museum of Discovery and with Junior Deputy. And since hopefully we can discuss this next week, so without going into a whole lot of detail, it looked to me that those requests from the fire department were incredibly critical to get those stations. I thought what Director Cox had brought forward before about the infrastructure and the drainage and the targeted community development were really critical. And I thought that considering that the Museum of Discovery, which I think we forget, is pretty much like a city agency. The lease was signed by Mayor Daley. It was not, there's this relationship that we have with the Museum of Discovery, and they have an incredible program that really reaches out to Title I schools, and they have a reduced admission for families that are on SNAP, and I've got all of the data on that, and Junior Deputy is the only viable community baseball program in Little Rock, and they turn away no children regardless of finances. And so I thought both of those were worthy to be included. And without being too repetitive, since we've been encouraged to bring things forward, I did. And next week, if this gets on the agenda, I will be happy to discuss any of these in more detail.
So just for clarification, thank you. You're very correct about encouraging, in addition to the proposed items that you all bring. So thank you so much for following up and even looking at it. Thank you. Much of it looks similar to some of the things that we propose, and with some nuances and changes, and we greatly appreciate that. I guess for clarification, because we haven't prepared an ordinance, are you asking for us just to go back and make consideration to infuse, or are you saying you want to prepare an ordinance from this?
I guess I would like,
Because since we haven't had an ordinance, what we would do is, in addition, as we're listening to you, and this is what you've given, make sure other board members have an opportunity to share, and then Ms. Cox, Bruce, and I will come back together with what we will be what I would call a collaborative approach of what we will forward. Is that permissible, Director Webb? Is that, or do you see it differently? Well, I'm just asking Director Webb.
I think a collaborative approach would be good, but probably the easiest thing in order to do that legislatively would be if we had two separate pieces and then put them together if the board so chooses, but to have two separate ones, if that's okay.
Two separate ordinances?
Resolutions or,
I guess we clearly can have two separate resolutions, but if, maybe it's I think, because if they're gonna be competing resolutions, what we need to do is figure out unless, are you sharing with me this is something that other board members agree with?
I talked to one person today who's not on the board, who knew what was gonna be on here, and that person is not on.
They knew what was gonna be on where?
To make sure, on my,
So this first time everyone's seen this, what you're saying?
I'm sorry?
Is this the first time everyone's seen this? Can you hear me? Is this the first time everyone has seen this?
Yes.
Okay.
So,
Can we do this? Can we just have a working session next week?
yes.
I guess what I'm sharing with the board, there's no reason to have two competing ordinances when we could all work together and figure out the best approach. And when we propose something, there still needs to be changes. The board legislatively can make some amendments. I was just trying to keep from having two different ordinances. But if we have a working session, since this is the first time everyone's seen this, because we got another week, other board members may want to tweak or add some other things in addition to what Ms. Cox has shared here today, what you shared, and just kind of leave it from there. Is that permissible to you?
As long as we're not gonna have, if I understand you correctly, you're saying that we will simply have a working session and we won't have anything to vote on next week?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. So, members of the board, if you all will take time to review Director Webb's recommendations in addition to what you all have before you as well. And if you have additional thoughts, we'll have a working session next Tuesday after our board meeting. Yes, Director Peck?
Thank you. Director Webb, would you, going into great detail, just explain the 3 fire stations?
And I apologize, but I was in a side conversation.
Oh, would you, excuse me for interrupting your side conversation. Would you briefly explain the LRFR capital needs, the 3 fire stations?
Yes. As I said, I went through the budget book, and under the fire department, it listed a need to make changes to the fire station that I believe is in Walton Heights to accommodate equipment. It talked about the fire station, and I don't have my budget book with me, that I believe is on David O'Dodd and something, that the need to have a fire station there, a temporary fire station, and a temporary fire station in West Little Rock. And that total cost of that from the budget book was $2.75 million. And I originally thought we had $6.5 million left, but as we've discussed tonight, it was 5.5. So I cut a little bit out of that, and I cut a little bit out of what was left over from the last tranche proposal on the infrastructure and drainage to add it all up to 5.5. And I will get the specific addresses out of the budget book and
that's
email
good.
it to you tomorrow.
No, that's fine. I, of course, know about Walton Heights. I know Lance's need for one in West Little Rock. Didn't know about the one on David O'Dodd. So that's enough information. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Hines?
Thank you. I am planning on, as soon as Tom gets it to me, two ordinances, I guess they could be considered competing for the, to ask the board to put them on Thursday night regarding spending authority at the level below 50,000. So Tom's working on those for me at the end of the week, and I'll plan on introducing those next week and ask for them to put on the agenda. I realize I'll have to have 8 votes, but that's my plan.
Okay. And what are the two you said? You said competing. What would be, are you going to have a?
Well, I mean, I'll look at them once Tom gets done and either put them both out there to see which ones the board members like or don't like. One is just a straight reduction in the spending authority of the city manager and the mayor, and the other one's a kind of a different tact on that same issue.
Do you care to explain or share?
I don't have that ordinance yet from the second ordinance. Tom's working on it, so I don't have it yet.
Okay. Thank you. Director Phillips?
Yeah, I just wanted clarity on the working session. So we're gonna have an actual board meeting next week, and then once we're done, we can dig deep into how to spend the 5.5. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes.
Okay, so no need for that discussion tonight is what I'm getting at.
Correct.
All right, thank you.
Director Richardson?
Real quickly, since we didn't change with respect to Director Hines' question, Tom, since we didn't change the form of government, does the mayor have that spending authority? Has he ever had that? Has he ever had that spending? Bruce doesn't like what they call discretionary spending, but it's spending authority. Has he ever had that?
The ordinance says the authority belongs to the city manager. The statute says that the mayor can exercise the authorities of the city manager if they're approved by the board.
So
Y'all haven't approved
we
that
have to
yet.
approve,
so-
yes, we have to, but typically in the past, that
I
Bruce.
guess to answer your question, Director Richardson, just for the record, I don't execute the contracts.
I don't think Stoller had that, utilize that authority since I've been on this
Yeah,
board.
I don't exercise that.
Okay, thank you. And Bruce has done a wonderful job with that since I've been on the board. I mean, he's been real.
Director Adcock?
Yes, Mayor, I have this item that I would like to add to the agenda. It concerns the ambassadors downtown with the Downtown Partnership. These people before the pandemic did a fantastic job for our city, and I think it's time that we bring them back. And this just says that I would like to have it included in the 2023 budget.
Yes, ma'am.
Can I ask a question on that?
Director Miller, yes.
Yes, Director Adcock, it says downtown. Does that, when you say downtown, does that go all the way down Main Street to 17th Street?
I'm not for sure. Mr. Moore, do you know? Or probably Director Computers.
I believe it does.
Okay, I just want to make that, just ask that question to make sure I knew what downtown included.
All the way to 17th
Okay,
in Ward 1.
thank you.
All right. Director Phillips, your hand's still up?
Yeah, it's up again. I just want to be clear. I know Director Adcock presented this resolution, but like Director Hines said, this will need 8 votes to be added next week, correct, City Attorney?
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
and unless the city manager offers that it's his, and then it only takes 6 votes. I'm not saying he will offer it, I'm just saying that's how the ordinance reads.
Thank you. Mr. Moore?
Mayor, since we're going to have a work session, may I suggest that we include the budget continuation next Tuesday also?
That's the pleasure of the board. I know Director Webb and wanted to make sure we got this started. So Director Webb, your thoughts?
Could we get a copy of it tonight so we could take it home and look at it? Or,
I think Ashley passed it out. Oh, okay, she has it, I'm sorry. Yeah.
I mean,
yes.
we don't want to spend time to go over them?
I think as long as we had a copy, I mean, I'm only can speak for myself, but if I had a copy to take home,
Yes,
I would
ma'am.
be more than happy to wait until next Tuesday.
That being said, Director Phillips, did you have, before I adjourn the meeting?
Do not
Let me also mention, Ashley, do you have two things? You're passing out three, yeah. The third item, besides the budget, the request for the city attorney and Office of Executive Administration is the overall city goals and objectives. Some of you all were here when we did this about almost 20 years ago. And it was really good work, I believe. And as you look through it, we are, I believe, still doing a lot of the bullet points that that the board agreed on. And it's kind of interesting that we did this in 2002. But that said, the new budget award presentations have to include a sort of updated objective list by the governing body. So if y'all would also look at that over the next week, and then we'll include that as a discussion in our work session. I don't think, and if you have any thoughts on things we need to include, if you can let us know before next Tuesday, that'd be even good. I mean, even though we talk about diversity, we really didn't have the terms we use now about diversity, inclusion, and inequity. So I was going to go ahead and make those changes, but we'd appreciate that as part of the discussion next week also. Thank you.
Director Phillips?
Yeah, very, very quickly. Thank you and City Manager for this information. Looking at the overall goals and objectives kind of triggered a thought in my mind, City Manager. Can we look again at possibly doing the board retreat? I know that's something that we talked about and then I don't know what happened to it.
Yeah, that's definitely going to be an agenda item for first quarter next year. We'll try to get it done the first 2 months.
Okay, I think that'd be great, but just thinking about policy things are kind of retreat-ish items, so that triggered my memory. So thank you. Look forward to it.
Mayor,
Mr. City Attorney?
at the last meeting of the Board of Directors, there were people here to speak on behalf of a zoning issue. They did not get registered, and there was a mistake that the card was lost, but it turned out that it wasn't lost, it was under something. But it was found out before the meeting ended that they were going to speak in favor of it. The board had voted against it. However, at the Planning Commission, something similar had happened, and more than one of you has contacted me about what can be done. And the answer is it can be reconsidered at the meeting on the 6th. However, if no notice is given that it's going to be considered on the 6th, it will take 8 votes to do so. If notice is given at this meeting, it will only take 6 votes to do so. Thank you.
So can I let them know, City Attorney, because I did get an email right before I got here from them.
Can you what?
So would you, you gave notice, so they will be able to speak?
It will take 6 votes to put it on the
So
agenda.
it'll take 6 votes to put on the agenda. Okay, am I permitted to tell them what the status is? I just received an email from them right before I came. Or should I wait?
Yeah, I mean, I have a pretty strong suspicion from the number of phone calls I got, you're going to get 6 votes to put it on the agenda.
Okay.
That doesn't mean you're going to pass it. It just means you're
Right,
going.
right, of course. Okay, thank you.
Tuesday?
Thank you so much. All right, meeting adjourned.